Greetings, winners. How you doing this Saturday night? Welcome. So happy to see you all here. Saying hello to my winners in the front row. Suzanne, how you doing? Daisy girl, how you doing? T3, there you are. There you are. Oh, man, you know where I'm hanging out. You can come say hi here in a minute. So happy you guys are here tonight. Tonight, we have a very special guest, a gentleman who has been on the show a few times, and we've been up at other arenas. But we have never done a one-on-one interview, and I'm so happy that he has agreed to come spend Saturday night with us. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get him into the show. So here we go.
Absolutely. I'm just to protect you.
You better ask somebody, gonna lose your mind.
Welcome, strategic guys. How you doing?
What an intro. What is that? That was really cool, man.
Man, I'm glad you enjoyed that, man. I had a lot of fun making that, and I was really excited for you to see it.
By the way, if you guys didn't know, that was a deep fake. It's not me. I'm not that cool. All right.
Oh man, hey,
here, man.
Thank you so much for being here. We got some more folks rolling in. Kaiwan, how you doing? Cool gamer, how's it going? Thank you for being here. Oh man, we got someone new here. TNT Cycles PDX, how you doing? How you doing? Black Sheep Tony, Black Sheepdog Tony G, how you doing? How you doing? So happy you're here.
Bombed by strategic eyes people.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Welcome, man. So glad you guys are here. I hope you enjoyed the show. We're gonna have a great time tonight. Strategic guys, man. So I originally met you I heard about you through our good friend V Radio, who I love to death. He's my boy. And I hope he pops in here tonight and says hello. But he turned me on to you, and then I subscribed to you, and then I saw you on Matters of Opinion. All right. And then I thought that actually was your show for a minute because I wasn't sure how to find you. And I kind of like that popped up first. Right. So I was on that, and then I got to your other channel. I watched some shows, and then I saw that you, because of that, I found Gary Lamb again. So in an indirect way, you're kind of responsible for me finding Gary Lamb again because I didn't know where he had gone. And I saw him spring up over there. And now we got a show together on Thursday nights called Repairing History together.
Oh, that's what's up, man.
Quite a ride. But that's what everybody collaborating helps do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Gary's such a talented guy, man. He's got his hands in everything. Like he's talking history, he's talking relationships, he's talking politics.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very talented guy. Big shout out to him. He actually allowed me on the show, invited me on the show. We actually had a one-on-one. And at that time, I probably had like maybe 4,000 subscribers, and he had like 100 and something thousand. So big shout out to Gary Lamb. Much love.
Absolutely, man. Hopefully he'll pop it here tonight and say hello as well. So hey, tell everybody about yourself, man. Tell us about your channel, and let's get to know you.
Yeah, man. Strategic Guys here. That's my YouTube name. Been doing YouTube for like 3 years now. So Jesus Christ, got to get the resume out. So I've been in law enforcement for almost 20 years. I started my career out as a mental health peace officer, like a glorified security guard at a mental health institution. Then I went on to be a correction officer, then a correction investigator, where I investigated sex crimes in a New York State prison system. Did that for 12 years, and then I moved on to policing. And I work for a police department in the state of New York. Can't say what department, not that I'm hiding it. People can find out if they really want to, but I just can't say it on YouTube. That's their rules, right? And recently I've been promoted to detective to investigate sex crimes, or as we say in the business, detective track, to investigate sex crimes. So I've been doing that for a little bit, and wow, it's really blowing my mind. It's much different animal than doing it in an institution. Wow, it's definitely a different animal. That's me.
All right. So, when you say investigate sex crimes, are you talking about like in the public? Are you talking about, okay, so in the public?
Yeah. So when I started out, I did it in the institution, like inmates getting raped by the inmates, staff involved with relationships with inmates, sexual relationships with inmates. I left that behind. I became a police officer, regular police officer on the street. And I got promoted to now investigate the sexual assaults, the rapes that happen among citizens, everybody out here on these streets.
Huh. That's got to be a challenging job right now, in the age of Me Too and so on. You know, it's a much needed thing in our society, but then you have these people out there that are making it tough by using it as kind of a cover, right? And
yeah, you know,
probably a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, it's really complicated because it's such a sensitive topic. You know, first of all, to do this type of work, you have to be empathetic. You know, you have to put victims first. But of course, I think a lot of it, some of it is maliciousness, where you'll have people making claiming to be raped and they weren't. And also, I think a large part of it is Me Too. Is, you know what? I gotta say this because I was thinking about it. Like, you know that they came out with this movie that's like divided the nation. It's called, or documentaries called, "What Is a Woman?" Remember that? I'm not here to speak on the politics of that. I love everybody, but it'll make sense, right? The issue that we're having in my line of work is, what is consent? You notice, like in What Is a Woman, nobody could really agree on what a woman is. You know, people who are on the trans side, they have their definition of women. People who are on the anti-trans side, or whatever side you want to call it, they have their own definition of women. Nobody can agree on what is consent, but the law and the investigators and the district attorneys, but the public doesn't agree on what is consent. And I think a lot of the cases that I get, a lot of the drama, the gray areas, the were you raped or were you weren't raped, is people not understanding what exactly consent is. So they assume that they know what consent is, and it's like, well, you know what? I think I was raped when you probably weren't raped, unfortunately. Or I think I had the green light to have sex with that girl, and you didn't. You actually raped her. I think that's a big issue.
Oh man, you know that it's wild that these things are coming up now. And hey, just want to shout out a couple of the new folks that are rolling in here. What's up, T. Williams? How you doing? T-Rex Trucking, my man. How's it going? Happy you're here. Happy you're here. Thank you guys for being here this evening. And of course, everybody on Rumble. And hey, shout out to the Rewatch crew. You guys make it happen. I love you. I love you so much, Rewatch crew. Thank you. Thank you for rewatching this when you can. You know, the thing is this, it's like, has this been an ongoing issue, or has this been pretty much decided throughout time and now it's been brought up as an issue? Like I'm trying to understand the history here a little bit.
Of what exactly? Consent?
Consent, yeah, the consent for sex, basically.
I think now, and I haven't been doing it on the outside long. I mean, I did it for over a decade on the inside, and we really didn't have this issue of consent because the law was very clear about the fact that an inmate can't consent to any type of sexual touching or sexual contact. An inmate can't have sex with another inmate. An inmate can't have sex with a staff member. If you have sex with a staff member, that's an E felony. It's called rape third. And if an inmate has sex with another inmate and it's consensual, then it's a sexual violation inside of the prison. It's not a criminal charge, but we'll put you in it. We'll separate you, put you in a box, and put you in a sex offender program. So clear-cut lines there. I think it's probably more. So I said all that to say that I have not been doing it long enough to know the historical trend. But I can tell you from my experience and just from my observation that I believe that it is more of a modern issue. You understand? Because women are more freer now to do the things that they want to do than they ever been before. So I could imagine in the 1950s and 60s, 50s and 60s, you weren't having women out 4 a.m. clubbing by themselves. Do you think so? But now you have that now. Now you had women going to social clubs and doing their things and doing their thing, but they were probably in groups, so they're probably with a man or a relative. But now we have women who's like, I'm bored at home. I'm gonna go to the club by myself, and I'm gonna get pissy drunk that I don't even know where I'm at. And what does that make you? It makes you vulnerable. In a perfect world, you should be able to go get drunk and do whatever you want and not have to fear somebody's going to hurt you. But unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world. So I think the freedoms that people enjoy, rightfully so, I wouldn't change a thing, but I think those freedoms come at a price.
Yeah, and the whole thing is this too. It's like there is, okay, we're human beings, right? We're out there and everybody likes to have sex, right? But there's the whole if you're going out just to get a one-nighter in or just to kind of get that going on, right? And that was your intent going out. And then you bring somebody home and maybe not your type, maybe, I don't know, you have some guilt the next day, they have some guilt the next day, and then they want to use that against that person. That's where I see the issue going on is like, women making bad decisions and are making decisions they regret later, and then using the law as a way to try to undo that decision.
Right. Well, it's funny that you say that because that's one of the big issues that one of the cases that come up often that we have to investigate. And you use a specific word toward the end of your statement that we use to categorize it. We call it regret complaints. You went out, you got really drunk, and it doesn't even have to be that, you wanted to have a one-night stand. You just went out. You wanted to have a good time out and drink. And then you end up in a bed with somebody that you don't know, or somebody that, you're not attracted to. They looked attractive while you were drunk. And it's like, okay, what do I do now? I just cheated on my husband. I cheated on my boyfriend. This guy had unprotected sex with me. I don't know what he has. I don't know if I'm pregnant. In New York State, if you are a victim of sexual assault, your medical is free. The moment that the hospital takes you in and you've said that you're a victim of sexual assault, they automatically key in a special billing code that it never goes to your house. You start the charge to the state. So if you want the HIV prophylactic that costs thousands of dollars, that's free. If you want the cocktail that will make sure you don't get gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis, and all that stuff, that's free. If you want that emergency, this is a whole packet that they give them. If you want your birth control, that's free too. And then you're entitled to all types of counseling, etc. That's also free. So we do see from time to time some people try and take advantage of the system, and they'll make these allegations. And then also think about this, and I spoke about this on a members only podcast I did earlier. You got to explain to your boyfriend or your husband why you can't have sex with him for 3 to 6 months, because you have to, when you take the cocktail, first of all, it makes you very sick, so you have to explain why you're sick. And then you have to, if you want to do it the honest way, you want to do it the correct way, the respectful way, you're supposed to get tested every 3 months for like 6 months to make sure that the cocktail worked and you didn't catch HIV or whatever. How do you explain, what is the best way to explain why you can't have sex, if not to say that you're a victim? But we have to be very careful when we have these conversations, because these aren't the lion's share of the allegations that we get. most women really are victims or really truly believe that they're victims. And we also have to admit that it also should be said rather that this happens to men a lot too, especially men of the LGBTQYA or IA community. So we get a lot of those cases. We get at this point we're getting just as much as many cases of men who are victims of sexual assault as we are getting women who are victims of sexual assault. But so I just want to be clear about that because this is a very sensitive topic.
Sure.
I'm not here saying that women are lying and that the majority of women out there are making these things up. I'm not saying that. We're just talking about a very specific small segment, small percentage of the allegations we get in that fall into that category. The majority of women should be believed, and we're finding that the majority of women who come forward, they either are a victim of sexual abuse or they legitimately believe they are, but maybe the law says otherwise.
Right. And when I think of it, and this is maybe a little bit traditional, but it seems to me to make sense. It's like when it becomes force, right? When it becomes force, when it's like you're hearing no, and they're not listening. Like they're not listening, and they're using physical force to perform the act. To me, that's what the grape is, And
well,
I don't.
Man, I did this. That's just not.
Help me out with that.
That's not.
Update me.
Yeah, that's not the correct way to look at it. Very few of them are like that. Remember, we're not in 1954 right now. We're in 2023. So people are giving people drugs that are incapacitating them where they can't move, they can't speak.
I would consider that force. Okay.
We also have sometimes fear and coercion, and maybe you might consider that force as well.
What's that? Explain that for me.
I'll kill you if you don't do this for me.
Oh yeah, that's complete force. Yeah. I have a very natural law approach to looking at consent. And I'll tell you what my definition of consent is in a minute. But yeah, go ahead.
But I'm gonna tell you where we get gray areas where a person where you might feel we'll get a few of these where women will feel like they were raped, but by the law they weren't, and it's really not even fair to the partner to say that they were raped. So for instance, we'll get a few where it's like, hey, I was really scared and I really didn't want to do it, but I didn't tell him to stop because I was scared. And then it's like, well, what was your conversation before that? Was he aggressive? No. Did he threaten you? No. I just went along with it because I was scared. So how is that other guy supposed to know that you're, and I wasn't having a good time? Well, did you let him know you weren't having a good time and you wanted him to stop? No. I just pretended like I was into it so maybe he could finish faster. We'll get that kind of scenario. And it's like, that's not, just with that bare minimum, of course, real life is more complicated, but that's not rape. Because how am I supposed to know that you're not consenting to this when you're not telling me to stop and you just admitted that you were going along with it, meaning that you were probably moaning and touching the person to make them feel invited into doing it. We get a lot of that. And sometimes you have to break it to the person like, hey, this is not what you think it is, or you may feel that way, and I'm not telling you not to feel that way, but we can't charge this guy for this.
Yeah, with consent is like I look at it from a more like energetic kind of thing. I guess we're very specific on the circumstances for this type of consent, right? But to me, consent is your free will and action, right? So you can say yes, you can say no, you can say I don't know. Like you make a decision to be indecisive, or you can say you decide for me. So that's like that's like a vote. You're saying I'm going to vote for you so you can make decisions for me. So I'm giving you my consent to be the leader here in this situation, right? So you're always exercising your free will in one way or another. That's to me that's our gift as human beings. That's our creative force. That's the way we get everything done is by exercising our free will. That's a gift from God, right?
Right.
To give us that free will so that we can be creators on this earth. And applied into law, applied into circumstances, it may change and vary, but at its bare essence, that's what it means to me. Like, and that's why I say be careful where you give your consent and who you give your consent to, and including the politicians, the systems, and everything else, right? So because enough consent gives people a tremendous amount of power. Think about when everybody says, "Hey, strategic guys, we're all going to do what you say." Like hundreds of thousands of people, you got some power right there. That's power.
Right.
So that's why I think consent is so sought after in the society, and that to the point where governments and companies and so on will go to the point of manufacturing that consent, like creating a narrative so that you'll buy into it and give your consent to them. So that's my take on consent and how I talk about it here on the channel.
Yeah. Well, you can also rescind consent too. You know, if you give somebody consent and you know, to go back to the sex crimes aspect, and they're having sex with you, and you say, "Hey, I don't want to have sex with you anymore," they have to stop. If you don't stop, it becomes rape.
Oh wow!
Absolutely.
That's interesting. The yeah, I mean, I guess it is. That's the whole thing too that I talk about as far as consent goes with what you've considered to maybe as far as leadership goes, right? It's like you can remove or like, you know, why I think that's why we have so much corruption today is people don't realize that they can actually that you spoke consent into it, you can speak your consent out of it. It's the power of your words, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't articulate it, then you're just kind of going along with it. You can think it all you want, but you got to actually express it.
Right.
Make it real.
So like to me, like I think like the solution to a lot of this, including with politics, is people need to learn to verbalize how they feel. You know, so we just have like the culture that's out there is like the Me Too culture, which is kind of like you should know that your actions are not good. You know, so like guys should know that she's not into it right now and should proactively stop. But this is not real world. You know, you have to be able to say stop, you know, and it's harder. I understand that, you know, and a lot of things, like I got to say this too, that a lot of these victims have been victimized before. And a lot of times why they're not verbalizing is because they're actually being re-traumatized. Like, you know, they're actually going back to that first assault and they're frozen, you know, with trauma. So, you know, it's one of those double-edged swords. Like when I talk about it, we could talk about it one way, but the more you analyze it, the way you start looking at it from a different perspective, because it's so complicated, man. It's like, it's like the most primal part of human existence, like sex and pleasure. And then when you add in society and intelligence, everything just goes crazy. We're not animals.
It really is. Yeah, it really is. And, you know, I think if it hadn't worked in the past, right? And and like you said, society is changing, but sometimes people just want to change things to cause it I guess a subversion there, right? They want to change things to kind of mess things up, you know, by changing something that's working. Like, you know, you can say what you want to or have your opinions about the whole idea of rewording and repackaging gender, but the gender roles that we've had throughout time have worked, and I don't think that those are things that we need to change. I mean, if you want to change, add a term, I'm all about. We can add terms and we can vote on that and decide if that's going to be right. I mean, I'd rather see the word expression used than gender, right? Not gender expression. Let's not touch the man and woman thing. This is my opinion, but let's talk about like. I'll gladly add the term expression onto an application rather than add 15 genders, right? Because to me, that's a subversion of something that's already been working historically for centuries for people.
Yeah, you know, I don't really comment much on that stuff. You know, I'm not really well versed in it. But as far as like men and women and like traditional gender roles, not talking about the whole LGBTQ thing, but like, or rather the trans thing. It's not LGBTQ. There's really no issue with gender stuff when it comes. It's just really including trans and accepting, you know, the title. I don't know, the titles or whatever that people want to be called.
Right.
But when it comes to like the roles of women and men, I don't know if it worked in the past. You know, I as a father of daughters, I don't want to have a society where my daughters are like relegated to staying home and raising the kids, and possibly with an abusive man, which happened a lot. That's why we made so many strides in domestic violence, because there was a ton of domestic violence. Like, how do you keep another person in check other than through fear? So your culture helps. So if you're raising and indoctrinating the person into a certain role, that's going to work to a certain extent, but you're always going to have people who are going to try and push the boundaries of those roles. And how do you bring those people back in check if not through violence and intimidation? So we had a lot of that back then. I think I don't agree with how things are now, and I don't agree with how things are back then. And I know it puts me in a precarious position that I actually don't have a solution, but it's like people like to go back to how things were as though it was some pristine time in our history. It looked nice. It was a time in our history where we knew how to make things look good, but it wasn't a good time in our history. A lot of people was hurt. There was a lot of inequality. There was just a lot of haves and have-nots. And I don't know if we go back there. I like the fact that women could be whoever they want to be and do whatever they want to do. I think we're going too far, that we need to understand that we need to not feel like we're in competition with each other, which is where I think we're at right now. I think we're at a point where women feel like they have to compete with men. The job market, the educational market. Maybe if we take that away, things might balance out. But, at the same time, I was raised in a household where a man had an opportunity to have a woman who was from that generation, who would have been subservient to him and, cook and clean and all that stuff. My wife doesn't cook or clean. Well, she cooks a lot, but she doesn't cook. She doesn't clean nearly as much as my mom. But my father chose to just leave us, So it's not like every guy was equipped to stick around and be this perfect parent that we are told was happening back in the days. I don't know. Like, I don't look to the past. I want to look to the past and the present, and I want us to come together and kind of work out how we move forward, because I think there's lessons to learn from both eras. I don't think one era or the other is a solution.
Yeah. I think it's not about so much about rolling back as in maybe re-examining things and creating a way to, without overriding the past, because that gets into this whole control of language thing that I believe is one of the root cause issues in society.
Yeah.
It's just that some people can have a control of their language. Like, I don't think that it's comfortable for people to be able to overwrite things that people are accustomed to, just because they have a whim. You have a small group of people who make a bunch of noise, suddenly gender's been overwritten, right? But that's been around for a long time. Now, if we adopt that approach towards anything, then nothing is sacred, nothing is stable, right?
Right.
Anything can be overwritten at any time. It's like I say that control language is a God level power. Like, think about it. If you had the power to overwrite anything and everything with a new term, a new definition, no, I'm going to change the definition of that. It'll always going to suit you, right? So you didn't have this God level power to control reality. And I think there has to be some kind of thought put into that before we just go, okay, well, this small group of intellectuals out of this one college based on this one book, right, are now called gender theory, are now overriding everything that's been we've known in mankind and civilization. I don't think that's a good way to go about it. But at the same time, you make excellent points in saying that we can't glorify all past systems as pristine. I believe you make a really good point on that. But at the same time, my fear is that you give this God level power out to these smaller, louder groups, and suddenly nothing can be stable. You can just overwrite anything. Anytime you want to.
Well, no, I agree with you. I agree with you absolutely. I mean, I'll use the BLM movement as an example. I have my own theories. I'm a very liberal person when it comes to. Maybe liberal is not the right word. Maybe it's what's the word? Libertarian, I guess, where you just feel like people could do whatever the hell they want. I have
do no harm, right? Do no harm.
Yeah, do no harm. Do whatever you want. Just don't hurt me. If you're not hurting me, I don't care. I'm very libertarian when it comes to like these social things, like sexuality and gender identity or stuff. I do have my feelings on them, unfortunately, these people like to cancel. So, I can't really talk about these things because, at the end of the day, I got a job, but
Right.
I hear you, and I respect what you're saying. I feel like in all things, we're going too far in most things. And I think that both sides need to find some type of balance when it comes to the whole gender thing. I look at, when I look at the trans folks, I look at it like, I view these things often like in a black and white lens. I look at it like there's not one black person during slavery who would want to be born black into slavery. If they could choose in heaven whether they go into a white body or a black body, they'll probably choose a white body so they could be free. So when I look at trans people, especially, why would you want to be born trans? Or why would you want to become trans? Why would you want to, whatever you believe, whether you think they're born trans or they become trans or they choose to be trans, why would you want to do that with all the stigma that exists? Maybe not stigma now, but think about the stigma that existed 10, 15, 20 years ago, 30, 40 years ago. Why would you want to do it if you had a choice? So I think that these folks are genuine in how they feel. I mean, I agree with everything that they're saying, but I think they're genuine in how they personally feel. And I think that there's just genuine anger, fear, and discomfort from the other side. And we just need to come and we need to talk about it in a reality-based, fact-based approach. So everybody's talking about the sports thing. One side says the science says nothing. The other side says the science says something. How about we really get the science of it? And people, and we get it from multiple sources, like we usually do in other aspects of our life when we're relying on science. It has to be replicated and all that stuff and blah, 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 blah. Why don't we do that? And why don't we agree on the science and we follow it? So if it's determined that a young boy who is on hormones can race with girls and there's no advantage, then that settles it. Let them race with the girls. But if it's found that there is a slight bit of an advantage, then you just can't race with them because it's not fair.
Right.
But you should be able to get married. You should be able to get a job without being discriminated against. You should be able to do whatever you want without somebody calling you a name or treating you less than the person you are. Shoot, we got to call you miss. Say it on your driver's license, whatever, to respect you. But you got to respect the facts and the science. I think we got to come to that point, because right now it's just emotions on both sides and we're not getting anywhere.
Yeah, it definitely is a thing, and that's in flux right now. And as far as that goes, I think that that's where the pushback comes, because we have this problem in the world where people aren't using logic. They're not using they're buying into fallacies, they're buying into emotion instead of using logic and being okay with it. The motto on my channel, and for everybody out there that's new, thank you so much for being here tonight. I really appreciate you guys being here, and it's really nice to meet you. The motto on this channel is we'd rather know the truth than be right. Right. And I think that's the thing that we all need to kind of adopt as a society to get to where we need to get to. And we also learn about, the logical fallacies that are out there. We study up, we get educated, and we learn the trivium. We had this trivium education, right? Grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And a lot that's been taken out of the school systems. A lot of it just comes down to education and kind of re-educating the youngest generations and so on, and making that part of the habit, instead of teaching them that, there's a color, the color has something to do with the person, right? Teach them or that you're not, if you're not born a certain way, you can make your own decisions about what you are, right? We should be putting in education like, real history with Thomas Sowell. That's what me and Gary talk about on Thursday nights. We call it Repairing History together with Gary Lammy. Here on my channel. On his channel, it's Repairing History with Winning Reality. So we do it that way. But there's a trivium education is another one. We need to get back into real education and new education, like media studies and information studies at a younger age, so they understand the influence of information. Because I was just talking to you backstage about, there's information mind control, information-based mind control, and trauma-based mind control that's out there right now in society, and it's just part of what we've been born into, right? And in order to get past that, we have to have the proper education to diffuse these methods and these mechanisms that subvert young people, because it always is an attack on the youth. And then we just grow up corrupted. We go one direction or another, right? Some of us survive the corruption, and some of us overcome it. Some of us fall for it. People fall into this. I say there's really the three real classes are there's a global ruling class, there's an infrastructure class that would be like me and you, right? And then there's this kind of like poverty level kind of criminal class that kind of falls down into this level. I call it the disposition class. So despotism, right? So that's the despot class. It's like the people that have the system has pushed them down to a place where they can't rise up and be part of the infrastructure class. Most people, and as a law enforcement officer, you'll probably agree with this. Most people, if you just go about your life, right, doing things you need to do and stay out of the system, as far as the criminal system goes, you're going to be left alone. You're going to be left alone. It's only when you run into crime, right? When you unfortunately cross paths with crime, or you unfortunately cross paths with the ownership class in some way, shape, or form, that you get knocked down, right? That you end up as a victim, right? And so
a victim of what?
Well, you end up as a victim in general. Like you can be a victim of crime. That's a victim of a certain type of abuse. You could fall for abuse of information. Again, I put this thing on this cycle of abuse, as we talked about. I'll pull the board up here real quick, since we seem to be going in that direction. And let me just show you right here. See, I think I need to turn this off when I do this. It works better. All right, here we go. Bring the board up. And so we talk about the veils of perception on my channel, right? And we talk about how we're all born into this first veil, with a lot of the things that we come to know, like the establishment media, government politics, the social media, and some of the things we've come across in our lifetime. That you can find this stuff in the first veil of information, right? And but a lot of people like grow up and they go, I'm not buying this stuff. I'm not buying this stuff they're telling me on TV. I'm not buying this. I don't want to be involved in this Marxist thing that seems to be being normalized. And so on, right? So they reject this establishment narrative. They move into the second narrative, and we cover. If you see this, these are things I've covered on my show already. So that's why they're I got a different structure to them. But so they end up in this second alternative narrative, right? And they end up in these rabbit holes, believing the world's going to end, and basically living in fear of these things of the unknown, right? So the mottos in these two veils are, subvert the young, change the culture. So a lot of this subversion right here, it's all information-based mind control, and it follows this kind of like this kind of pattern of ideological subversion, like the demoralization and the destabilization of our society. And these things have a purpose, right? And you can see there's a lot of things in here too: disinformation, COINTELPRO, with Fed informants, and so on like that. And then the more you go this way, the weirder it kind of gets, right? So you kind of like, you're not in the mainstream anymore when you're over on this area. In this area, you're kind of still in the mainstream. You can go about your whole life and just kind of like believe in whatever you're fed.
Right.
And as you go along, what I've learned is that these two narratives really have a purpose. And this purpose is to serve this third veil. And that is a cycle of abuse, right? So the cycle of abuse is this false information type of society where you're breaking young early. They're setting them on their path, right, to either become a victim, become a criminal, or become somewhere in between, like an average person, kind of like living under the assumption that these things are just the way that these things are normal, when really these things are all kind of a manufactured division, right? A manufactured way to divide people, right? Manufacturing consent, you're manufacturing the opposition, right? And then you get into the third veil, right? Which is, I think, where we're going to really be focusing tonight, these two veils. And you get this manufactured generational corruption. And as you were talking with me backstage about, is that, you see that having become a police officer, that you see how there is something in the institutions that seem to be making people into this stuff, right? The poverty, the crime, the attitudes towards other people, the narcissistic epidemic that's on display in our society today. And this cycle right here, abuse the young, break the future. So as these systems are breaking us as young people and keeping us in these boxes here, right? This underlying veil, the cycle of abuse, is empowering this bigger cycle of control for the global ownership class, the ones that stand above us and do not care for us, the ones that aren't racist, they're not sexist, they think everybody's beneath them, right? But yet we're the ones divided into this crisis and this destabilized kind of world. So this is like what I call manufactured dysfunction, right? And in this veil, you see some of the heavy stuff, right? Now, something you may be familiar with is this prison industrial complex and the troubled teen industry, right? This is where some of the worst offenders end up. The worst, and at the end of the day, they have been abused on some level, whether it be economically, informationally, or physically, and they've landed themselves into these kind of systems right here that have institutionalized the corruption within them. Like, I don't know if you know much about troubled teen industry, but a lot of these troubled teen institutions aren't helping kids or making them worse. It's actually a very abusive system. And I've had the survivors from the Elon School on, Mark Babbitts and Jeff Block, and to feature the movie The Last Stop. And I did 2 great shows on that, 3 great shows on that, actually. I think they'll probably get thrown out there in the chat here for the links for the crowd to check these out, because I didn't know about this until I found these guys. And this, like the prison industrial complex, this is setting up teams for a life of crime. A lot of them don't end up ending themselves. They never have a functional life, right? But yet they were sitting here because they had drug problems, because they had some other kind of institutional psychological problems. Their parents were narcissists or abusive in some way. Maybe they got caught up in this thing right here. You know, there's all kinds of cycles of abuse that are going on. And when we step back even one more veil, we see that what's fueling this is coming from this top ownership class. So people will fall into something like, say, the New World Order, a line of thinking, right? And they will think that, okay, well, you can list out the bankers and the big global cartels. You can list out these think tanks and these like the CFRs and the trilaterals and all those guys, right? You know, they have monetary control. You know, they have market control, and their real goals are like full spectrum dominance. It seems like they want to control you for life, right? So you see that this is a generational system, and like people think that I think they run into this idea that, you know, it's just this one group and you take them out. No, it's an ongoing generational thing. They've figured out that if you subvert the young, you can change the culture. That if you give people rabbit holes to live in fear, they'll stay on defense. They'll never make any progress. So these people cannot come to any like logical conclusions and logical reasoning, so they could put real solutions together. And then you see that that they're able to continue this generational corruption, and that controls our reality. So why are we born into such a weird world? Why are all these nasty things happening? We could actually trace it back to how we were treated when we were young, the world that we lived in, that we accept blindly, and that, you know, what power is that? So this is kind of like what I talk about on Unveiling Reality. And this is their maintenance of power. This is how they keep that power. They manufacture the consent through these systems, right? They manufacture opposition and division, right? Creating division and destabilization. And then they go on to maintain their own wealth and power. And so that's why they seem so untouchable. Like, we can never get to them. They're generations ahead of us. So what we talk about here on my channel is this idea of solution culture. And in solution culture, as we're still here in the human realm here, this kind of gets into the more idea and energy realms. But they outside of ourselves as humans, these bigger ideas in the universe. The idea that we can start a solution culture. And I think that you're really, what I see from you, Strategic Guys, is you're really doing this in a lot of ways, especially talking to you backstage and hearing what your intentions are and what you're doing, is that we start having that role model leadership out there. Like, you know, you have a family, you're in the home with your children, you're being a role model for others. You know, you're putting your knowledge to help them grow out there. You know, we get back to logic. We get back to real history, not subverted history. Like Thomas Sowell does a great job of this. And that's why I dedicate an entire show to him. And Gary and I are running through his material, and we're talking and we're healing division that way.
When I hear guys like Thomas Sowell, and like, because like he's on the right and people from the left, and when I do my own research, when it comes to like the early history of this country, slavery, etc., like I never really hear them talk about what I believe is the true history of slavery, which
Mhm.
is that, and maybe it's because it's my profession, but nobody talks about all of the abuse and the rape that occurred. Like
Hmm.
I listen to Thomas, I never really hear him talk about that. Even when I listen to the other side, they don't really talk about that. And like I feel like we should teach people the true history of this stuff. You got Officer Tatum saying that slaves were happy. Like, yeah, of course there was like one or two slaves that were able to buy slaves. When we say one or two, I'm saying in a grand scheme of things, there's a percentage. Percentage who was able to purchase their freedom and start their own businesses. A percentage that learned good skills from being forced to do it on the plantation. But like, you hear this from guys like that, and what it does is it turns people off. It makes people not want to listen, even though you may make a good point in a different part of the conversation. Like regardless of whatever positives one might be able to construe came out of slavery, you look at African Americans in America,
Mhm.
and they don't look like Africans from Africa. And the reason
Right.
why and whenever an African American takes a genealogy, they have a certain percentage of white and Native American in them. And there's a reason for that. Because we literally got raped into a new race of African, seriously. Like, so that really pisses me off. I don't want to go off on a tangent and just go out of left field, but like, Saul doesn't have the answer. And neither does any. You want the answer, go read it for yourself.
Right. Well,
You know?
here's the thing. I understand he's not hitting those points in his what he's doing. And I don't think that what he's trying to do is about hitting those points particularly. Yeah, the crimes and the terrors of human beings and the things they'll do to each other, especially in situations, right? We can learn a lot of the psychology in that, right? I think
Right.
what he's trying to prove, the point is that we've all been victims and participants in slavery. So we need to kind of be on equal footing when it comes to that. And that the subversion of our history and the omitted facts that he's plugging back in help bridge the gap that's out there that's causing the division between the races. And that's what Gary and I talk about a
I
lot on our
still don't
show.
agree with that. I don't think that we were on equal footing. What I can agree with what Saul says is coming out of it, we were a better community. And we need to look back to how we were during that time. So this was maybe a little bit where I'm contradicting myself from our earlier conversation about glorifying the old days. But we did have higher marriages, more religion, more male role models. Our greatest civil rights leaders came out of that era. We don't have those leaders anymore. Those role models anymore. Our role models are NBA Youngboy and Drake. So that part of what Saul says, I 100% agree with, and I appreciate him saying it. Hey, listen, look at how we came out of this situation and how we were able to build strong communities until the era of crack came and everything went batshit crazy. But I don't feel like we were on equal footing. It doesn't matter how many Africans and African Americans, they weren't called African Americans at the time, but we'll call them now. How many African Americans aided in the slave trade? Because it did happen. How many African Americans sold slaves? Because it did happen. How many African Americans owned slaves? Because it did happen. I don't care how many of them you could find. It will pale in comparison to the amount of African slaves that actually were in bondage. And not all white people own slaves. That's a fact.
Right.
But they did enjoy more rights than black slaves. And
that's historical, though. That's historical throughout time in every place on earth.
all right, but still, listen, we can say that to soften it, like, hey, slaves been around for 1,000 years. But guess what? It's what I tell people all the time. Everybody's trauma is their own. You can't look at somebody's trauma and say they're more traumatized than somebody else. We can't look and say, oh, look, they owned slaves in Africa. Of course they did. Of course. In fact, half of the slaves that came to America was the Hutus selling the Wutus to the slave guy because that was their enemy. That's a part of history, But to me, it's disrespectful, and I'm saying that liberally. Please, I'm not saying you should feel disrespect for having your opinion. I'm gonna scratch it. I don't want to say that.
Okay.
All right. That's not appropriate thing to say. All right. To me, it's inconsequential to tell me that this has happened for generations. We're talking about what happened with us. Now, I am not in the camp that we should demonize white people of today for what happened yesterday. Absolutely not. I don't feel like I'm owed anything from white people today, reparations or anything for what happened in the past. My issue is different. It's different than Thomas Sowell. It's different than the activists on the left. My issue is that we're not teaching the real history so that we could truly learn from it and heal from it and move forward. I want white folks in that class learning that history not to feel ashamed of being white, but looking at it from an academic perspective so that we could truly see how foolish it was and make sure that we love each other for the content of our hearts and not the color of our skins and move forward. But I am not in a camp and this is just a natural state of affair. This is a human condition that's been practiced for a cajillion years. I'm not saying you say this, but some people do. We need to just get over it and move forward. Because, if you really learn the history, you know that, okay, slavery ended, but I do believe the CIA brought crack cocaine into the hood. That's a part of the oppression right there. You know what I'm saying? I do believe that the CIA, maybe I'm a conspiracy theorist, and government agencies assassinated Martin Luther King, had a hand in assassinating Malcolm X, had a hand in destroying, and we all know the FBI was surveilling Martin Luther King and telling him to go kill himself, otherwise they would expose his infidelities to his wife. And then I hear guys, like, whenever I see that, I see in the comment section, she is a piece of crap. He had mistresses. Motherfucker, you had a mistress too. Can I curse on your channel? Is that all right? Yeah.
Yep.
You got a mistress too, so why are you judging Martin Luther King? Like, he was like any other celebrity. Girls are throwing a poom at him, and he's a human being, so he's going to take some of that poom. But what does that have to do with his message? What does that have to do with what he was fighting for? You know what I'm saying? So we know that the FBI was doing that. We know this stuff. We know that the FBI probably killed Kennedy too. You know what I'm saying? Like, so we can't pretend like this country has not made a concerted effort for decades to hold down marginalized communities. And I think the reason why they're holding them down is not because they're black or Latino or whatever, or even white, middle America, poor white, is because they need a working class.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it has to do with that. But this is my point, and this is the point that I make on repairing history. And hey, look, you're right over it. I think this is we could have conversations and drill down on some of those points. Like, I could go into the Marxist effort that was behind Martin Luther King that he wasn't aware of, that's been in the black community for a long time. That's a whole other story, right? But as far as what I'm trying to prove and kind of put out there is that it's never been us against each other. It's been them, the global ownership class, the elitists, right, who think they're better than everybody, regardless of race or sex, right? That's always pitted us against each other. And in my initial series, Repairing History, before Gary joined the show and we changed the name, I went through all of that. So I have a playlist out there. It's called Repairing History. My mods will throw it in the chat for you guys. That has the rundown of all of that and how I go about proving that it's always been them against us. And I'm talking about those people that own all of us, right? Not just and that they use propaganda and they use fear and they use a lot of that stuff that I showed in the veils, a different time, different methods, but the same veils to put us against each other. They created the fear of the black man in the white society. And in the white, quote unquote white society, a lot of people don't realize the white's a made up word. And Walls P from Matters of Opinion, man, opened my eyes to that. And I thought, man, that's some of the most important information I've learned in a long time. I didn't even think about that. I've been calling myself white all these years. And like, that's a made up word. We used to have traditions. And I say this too. The one thing that we took away from the black community is their heritage. And I'd like to give it back. Like, I think that I'd like to know, where's your heritage from? Are you Kenyan? Are you Ethiopian? Or I'm interested in that kind of stuff. And I want you to have that heritage too. Like, I mean, we're all mutts here in America. I'm a mutt. We're all mixed together and we're the big melting pot. And in the end, what matters is we're just Americans, right?
Right. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. And
I think that racism ends when we both can point up there and say it was them the whole time. Now let's get arm in arm.
Yeah, but it's so hard to do that at this point. And listen, on my show, I talk about us getting to that point where we just view each other as Americans and understand exactly what you're saying, that it's the ruling elite that's holding us down. But we have to understand that they were so effective at what they were doing, brainwashing the population and turning the population against each other, that it became personal, because
Oh, yeah.
it wasn't the man that was saying, you know, go drink at that water fountain, you nurgle. I didn't say the word. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was your white neighbor that said that. You know,
Right.
it
They
was
were
your white neighbor
manipulated into
that said,
believing that was the right
you know,
thing, but it
you
wasn't.
looked at my woman and I'm gonna get you lynched now. And
Mhm.
that whole song from the poplar tree is how they'd hang the black folks from the tree and they'd cut off their genitals and cut off their fingers and wear them as trophies. Regular white folks did this shit. You know what I mean? So
Right.
so what I'm saying is we need to have, I think we're so far away from that. I'd like to get there, but we're so far away and we can't even have these conversations without people running away, you know, without people
Mhm.
just putting up that
Yeah, man.
protection
You
wall.
need to come on to you need to come on for an episode of Repairing History together, man. I've
Mhm,
been thinking about bringing you on anyways for that, and
mhm,
that would be interesting because I like your takes on these things,
mhm,
and we could have that conversation
mhm,
and really kind of expand on it because I think you would get a lot of the show and add a lot to the show as
mhm.
well. So I'd love to
No,
have you on for that in the future
no doubt, buddy. You
as we
know,
go.
man.
Yeah, man. As we drill down on it, because that's important. I could tell your heart's in it, and you want the same thing, and you want the same outcome as we do. You know, it's like,
Right.
yeah,
Oh
we're
yeah,
all in this
absolutely.
trying to make it better. Hmm.
You know, and you can see that, you know, the same tactics are being used now, you know, with police,
Hmm.
you know, with the whole hate the police stuff, you
Yeah, I
know,
want to talk to you about that.
and even in the LGBTQ where we're now being pit against each other. Like the average gay person doesn't care about half the stuff that it's being said that they care about. You know what I'm saying? And the
Right?
average
Yep.
straight person doesn't care about half the stuff that we're being said that we should care about. It's crazy stuff happening in this world, man. It's crazy.
Agreed. I agree with you on that, and I
Yeah,
definitely have my opinions about the what should be the solutions ideas for
yeah.
that community that's going on right now because I see what's happening. I see that that rainbow that rainbow has become a shield for some of the worst people amongst us to hide
Yeah.
in to abuse and hurt the young
But that,
people.
but that always happens, you know. Like
Hmm.
it happens regardless, you know. Like when I was growing up, an organization saved my life that kept me off the streets. It was called the Boys Choir of Harlem, and I sang
Okay,
classical music all over the country. I sang at Carnegie Hall, Kennedy Center,
that's
Lincoln
awesome.
Center, New York Post, New York Pops, Boston Philharmonic, New York Philharmonic, whatever. I sang everywhere. Commercials, Army commercials. I was like the voiceovers. I was on the Mace album, Harlem World. My
That's
gosh,
awesome, dude.
whatever,
That's so
everything.
cool.
This all kept me busy, kept me off the street. It was a boys' choir of Harlem. What does that mean? Boys, key word, right? Well, one of the
Huh?
counselors was a fucking pedophile, was raping some of the kids. You know, it's
Oh,
always going to
jeez.
be that way. Look at the priests. Well,
Hmm.
90% of the priests just want to serve God, but you're going to have that percentage that's like, oh, these folks, oh, they have access. Okay, I'm going to go where I have access. Look at teachers. Look at how many male and female teachers. Sometimes it seems like it's more female than males. Male and female teachers abuse their children. Why? Because that's where the prey is. So they gravitate to it. So the same thing goes for the LGBTQIA community. You're going to have some people who are going to gravitate there if they feel like it gives them access to their victims. And I just want us to
There
be
you go.
careful that we don't demonize them. You know, my father didn't
Me
teach me
too.
how to tie my first tie. It was a gay guy that taught me. You know, it was like, yo, let me show you. You know, these are people. This is normal people who just want to live their life. It's just a whole bunch
I agree
of
with you on that. I agree with you on that. That's why my idea is
propaganda.
I'll throw this at you. Is I call it the brand split, right?
Right.
The brand needs to split. That the whole letter alphabet thing needs to split up because
Right.
when it was just the L and the G, right?
Mhm.
That was understandable, right?
Mhm.
It's when you start adding all the additional letters to it, that things got all corrupt in it.
Right.
You know, I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I live down near in Midtown, and that's where they used to hold the annual Pride festival down there, right?
Mhm.
And in the beginning, back in the 90s, they were it was very just a time for them to party and get together and do their thing, right? And now
Mhm.
it's turned into something completely different. Now they started adding all their letters. The rainbow used to be just, hey, this is a club for people who are like this. That's what it
Right.
used to mean. That's all
Yeah.
it meant. Now it means something completely different.
Right.
they have infiltrated that group, added all these letters. They've added fetishes to lifestyles. That's the way I call it. Some people
Right.
disagree with me, but I call it
there's lifestyles, like how do you live day in and day out, and then there's fetishes, so like what you know, what's your kinks and all that stuff. They've mixed them all together, and
Right.
so that's created this ability for the worst amongst us to then gain access. And like that's what I say, all the groomers need is unsupervised access with your kids. Right. I'm sure you're fighting against that all the time, and thank God there are people out there fighting against it, because we need to have someone out there with the authority to do something about this. Online predators. I've done research on you know, particular things, right? And I've gone through and I've seen the sex registries from around the country. Right. And I've read the charges of these people as I go through it. In fact, I had my son sit down and look at the ones in the area that we live in. I said, these are the people that live near us that have that are on this registry, you know, see them, look at their faces, see what they've done, see how they've done it. And I've made him learn it so that he knows that these people exist, and that, you know, you need to be careful about, if you happen to see one of these people, be careful about these people around here. And this is how they do it. You know, I've educated them on that.
That's
But
good.
thank God there's people out there that can do something about this and that are working to do something about it. And that's why we got to, like, you know, the idea is this: when I encounter a police officer, I know two things about them. I know, one, they can save my life, and two, they can change my life in another way, right? So it can go both ways, right? They're and that's the quandary I think people have with law enforcement these days. I'd like to see them as the heroes that they are, right? But at the same time, they're also have to, like, meticulously and stoically enforce the law. And a lot of times people don't understand that law. And you know, hey, you know what? I you know, sometimes you fall into that, and it sucks, and it's just you know, and a lot of times you know, you fall into the system somehow. You get a speeding ticket, or you get something like that. Like one time I had I paid off a expired tag thing, and I paid it off on the day of it, but they didn't get to the judge in time, so my license got suspended. 6 months later, I get pulled over with a suspended license, and I had to go down with that, right? But and that was nobody's fault. That wasn't the officer's fault. He was very cool about it. He let my friend come get my truck and everything. I mean, it was just like very cool about it. He couldn't do anything about it because he had to do his job, and I understood that. A lot of people don't get that, you know, that they're just doing their jobs. Now, on other times, that's kind of like, you know, backfired and stuff, where people are able to subvert the law because they understand how to get through the cracks on it and commit crimes and get away with it. You know, it's a double-edged sword, but I think we have to understand, at the end of the day, people like you put your life on the line to do the right thing. And sometimes you got to do the administrative thing too. And it's hard. How do we get that away from the people who want to defund the police, the people who want to do away with law enforcement and bring anarchy into society? There's just no way that's going to work, right?
Well, I think law enforcement is a very tricky topic, because so I've seen law enforcement from both sides. I wasn't always somebody who supported cops. I was never vocally somebody who was against policing. But when I grew up in Harlem, that was during the era of stop and frisk. And I have been abused by cops quite a bit. Harassed, harangued, thrown up on a wall, searched for no reason, guns pull out on me. One of my earliest memories of a gun being pulled on me was not from a thug or a gangster, it was from a cop. We were in a staircase cracking jokes. We were in a project. We lived there. That's normal for projects. It's dangerous outside, so the kids often hang out inside of the building where they feel safe. And we're cracking jokes, and all I hear is steps, somebody coming up the steps, and then I feel all the heat being pulled off the back of my head. And that was when they used to have the metal guns, not the Glocks, the Smith & Wessons. And that metal will conducts heat, so it'll suck all the heat off. And I turn around, it's a cop with a gun in my head, like, what y'all doing? And we're just little kids, like literally 14, 15. And then, you know, he's like, oh, you know, you guys smoking crack? And then he kicks a crack vial, because this is during the crack epidemic, so like crack vials was everywhere. Like you couldn't walk down the street without hearing crunch, crunch, crunch. He kicks a crack valve at me. And then I'm like, what? I start freaking out like I'm about to die. And then his partner start laughing. They would just, that was their way of a joke. His partner starts laughing and says, you know, they're not smoking crack. Y'all get the hell out of my staircase. And then we told us to get the hell out of there. So there are a lot of
That's not
bad
funny
cops.
pulling a gun on somebody like that, man.
Yo,
Yeah.
listen, these evil dudes, you know, there's a lot of bad people who's in policing, but the vast majority are good people. And I think what we need to do is we need to invest in our policing. The defund police thing is stupid. We need to start taking policing more seriously than we do as a society. If you want to do nails, you have to go through months and months of schools and take multiple certifications and then recertify every year. You want to be a lawyer? Look how long it takes to be a lawyer. Look how long it takes to be a beautician, to do hair. Look how long it takes to get your CDL to drive a truck, and how meticulous that is, and how closely they watch you. If you get a speeding ticket, you could get your CDL suspended. Look how hard it is to do all these other things. But when it comes to policing, in most part of the country, you just need a high school diploma or a GED and 3 to 6 months of an academy. Baltimore just raised their police academy to 6 months. During the Freddie Gray era and prior, it was a 1-month academy. So
I remember like 10 years ago, they're talking about how they were lowering the requirements to be in law enforcement so they could get them they were getting in more people that were not suited for the job.
Right. So what we need to do in order to fix, so this is where that bad blood comes from. And I think a lot of what we're dealing with today is it's whatever power brokers that want to create this atmosphere, but I think it's also a cultural thing. You got people from my generation who are now telling their kids who are 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, their experiences. And those kids may not even have had those experiences for themselves because policing has changed a lot in that time. And they're channeling those traumas. At least I see it, in my own community where I grew up. Because if I didn't become a cop, I would be telling, and I didn't understand how it was to be on the other side, and I didn't understand all the changes that have occurred in my department and other departments, and how geared towards the community it is right now, as opposed to how these departments were in the past, I would probably still feel the same way. That's a traumatizing event. What happened to me?
Yeah.
Now, that wasn't the last time a gun was pointed at me. The next time a gun was pointed in my back was during a robbery in Blockbuster when I was working. It was a store robbery. I weighed that trauma from a thug who put the gun in my back, hog-tied me with tape, with my hands on taped to my ankles on the floor in the back, and then proceeded to beat the manager bloody with his gun for the money right in front of me. I view that trauma on the same level as that cop who maybe playfully put a gun to the back of my head and laughed about my fear to his partner. It's on the same level. They're both the same thugs to me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
The only way we're going to repair this is by changing the nature of policing, changing the requirement to get in there. Our policing should be like Europe. You get paid to go to school for 2 to 3 years, policing school. You're a police officer cadet. You're in a special police school for 2 to 3 years before you hit the streets. You already got 3 years of your career done just for them teaching you how to be a police officer. And then you become a police officer. That's what we need to do. And you get paid a livable wage. You get paid a wage that will make a therapist, a psychologist, maybe even a lawyer say, you know what? I'm kind of bored being a lawyer. It's not that big of a hit if I go be a cop. Let me go take those skills and go be a cop. That's what you need to do.
Yeah. It's funny. I didn't even realize that the schooling for police officers had diminished. I grew up in the age of police academy, right? So they made like 4 or 5 of those movies. It seemed like they were always in the police academy. Yeah. I figured there were still police academies out there, and they were going through this year in and year out training like college.
Nah, it's just police academy. Depending on your department, most of them are average around 6 months now. You go in, My academy was 6 months. They teaching you the law. They teach you how to shoot. They teach you how to fight a tiny little bit because you can't really teach somebody how to fight in 6 months. And they throw you on the streets.
Yeah, there should be there should definitely be more diligence when it comes to that, and that's why I say a lot about people these days will and automatically point at the cops. I'm like, it's training. We see like that gentleman who got he was a security officer recently, right? And he was trying to help an autistic child, and he got shot on the ground. Remember that? Did you remember that one? He got shot on the ground.
He was like an aide. He was like an aide. I don't think he was
right. That never should have happened.
Yeah.
Now, when Gary saw that, we looked at that together. When Gary saw that, he saw, and this is what our breakthrough was, is that he saw himself on the ground then, and that he got riled up by identifying with the victim. And what he said, and we had the black and white discussion. He's like, well, when white folks will look at that and look at it differently. And I tried to make them understand it. So we wouldn't necessarily identify with the white man on the ground. What we see is the system itself not working. And we immediately, our thoughts would go to, we need better training. We need to do this better.
Well, why do you think that is? What do you think that is? That a black person would identify with the victim, but a white person would look at the system as a whole.
It's just difference in perception. We had an episode on, is racial perception the biggest divider, right? The way that we see each other is because we don't have a white community.
Right.
There is a black community. There's not a white community.
Yeah, the white community is the community.
Well, I mean, it's like we don't look at ourselves as a white community. There's no gathering of the white folks to talk about white issues. We don't have that. Because again, like Wallace pointed out, white's a made-up word. We're just a conglomeration of a bunch of different cultures put together, from different countries. As Americans, we're a bunch of mutts. So we didn't have the opportunity to have a community, right? We never thought of it that way. But then, he points to that, and I'm like, I point to, well, if we were in Africa, right, it'd be majority black, and we'd be the minority would be white, or in China, or in other places where it's a cultural majority, right, of one type of race of people. And here we don't have that. So we get this white term thrown on us, and then we're supposed to be the white community, and we're not communing. We're just neighbors. We don't think of it that way. I think of you as my neighbor, and I think of whoever else. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, man. I go to most places, and a lot of times I might be the only white person there. Right. And it's okay. I mean, it's like, it's no big deal to me. These are my neighbors. This is my community. I don't think of it as a skin color kind of thing. And that's why I think the differences between our perception is, and that's what we wanted to point out on our show, is like, now we had that breakthrough, right? I understand that, Gary sees himself on the ground. He sees his son on the ground. And I get that. But, we also have to realize that it's okay to say that cop needed better training.
Right.
They never should have fired that gun. Because when they asked the cop why they did it, they answered, I don't know.
Yeah, he should have been fired and charged, really. Because, look, if you're going to take on that responsibility, I don't know is not an acceptable answer.
Right.
Like, even though the training could be better, that's one of the trainings they do give you. The most important training you get is a training of deadly physical force, because that is the biggest decision a cop has to make. They skimp on community relations and how to de-escalate and all this extra. Well, actually, de-escalation is at the top of the list now in the last decade because of all the situations we've had. But the number one thing that has always been trained into police since the beginning of time is deadly force. When can you shoot? When can you not shoot? So I remember that distinctly. The cop he was fired, and I believe he was criminally charged too, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know what happened of the case, but that wasn't a respectable answer. But I will say this. I think that the reason why, and when I said that you are the community, I was actually agreeing with you. I was just saying it in my artful way, meaning that this is just a white country and you don't have to look. So I agree with you 1000%. We're just using different terminology. Like, this is a white country. You don't have to consider yourself a community because it's the dominant race of the country. Like you just living your life, But I think that one of the reasons why you do have this whole, I identify with the guy on the ground, or I see myself in him, is a vestige of being a part of the underclass, is a vestige of slavery, is a vestige of, feeling as though the system is rigged against you. you know. So I think that's where that's born out of. You know, you're
Right. Well,
forced into a community because you feel like there's a common thing that holds you down, and that's the color of your skin, whether it's perceived or not. I'm not having the conversation whether that's right or wrong. It's just the fact that you have a group of people that they, regardless of what tribe they came from, what their lineage might be, going back to Africa, they still have one thing in common that's irrefutable, and that's the color of their skin, and that is synonymous with oppression, or being oppressed, rather. And I think that's what brings us together.
Unfortunately, even though I would say that most white people wouldn't want that or don't feel that way. The conversation we had, Gary and I, was about empathy, right?
Right.
And that he didn't feel like that the white folks would empathize with that situation, and his empathy comes from identifying and or seeing himself, projecting himself into that situation.
Right.
And we're saying, well, our empathy comes from the fact that we think that we need to do better with the system itself so that doesn't happen. Like we need to do better with the training, the individual. So we look at it on an individual basis, going, that one person made that mistake. When he's like, he sees it as a systematic thing.
Well, I don't think I would agree with that either. I don't think that I would feel that a white person would not have empathy for the man that's on the ground. You know, I on a human to human level, I would think that any human being would have empathy. Right. And I think during the reporting of that, it was clearly shown that most people, period, regardless of their race, had empathy literally for the guy on the ground. Like, oh my God, he was just helping, and now look at him. He's clearly articulating that he's not a threat, and he's trying to explain to the officers that the child was playing with a truck. So I don't know if I agree with that.
Well, yeah, and walk me through that scenario real quick, because a lot of us don't have the experience of being in that situation as a police officer. What's going on there? Like, what's going on in that situation? There's a lot of caution that's being put out. They're very far away. Go ahead.
I don't even know, because it was so long ago. All I remember, like, I don't know why they would even feel like they needed to do what they did in the first place. Like, the kid is playing with a truck, and the guy was there. So we'd have to rewatch the whole video to see, why did these officers form a perimeter? Like, I think the officer who actually shot the guy had a scope on, so you couldn't see through your scope that he had a truck, a toy truck, a train, or whatever he had. So I could not even begin to walk you through that to say, well, at this moment the officers were just, because based off of my flawed memory, because it was so long ago, to me it was like they should have just walked up to them like, everything all right, guys? Oh, he ran away from the group home. Okay, let's go, kid. Let's help bring him back to the group home. I can't remember anything distinctly that stood out that said we should form a perimeter, get the long guns out, hide behind the barricades, and give verbal commands. Suspect, do not move. Let me put my God voice on. Do not move. Put your hands up. You know, I don't recall anything like that happening that would have warranted that type of response.
Oh, you got low on there all of a sudden.
Because I took the God voice.
Okay.
On. There we go. Is it better?
Oh yeah. You're back now. All right.
Awesome.
I'm scrolling back through my messages, Gary, because I sent him a couple cop watch videos, but body cam footage analysis videos. Here they are. All right. And a couple of these it came off of this conversation, right? Well, one of them, and I hope that I don't get in trouble for playing this, but I want to play it. Let's see. Okay. This is okay. Let me ask you a question. You do these all the time. If I use police activity on here, it is a YouTube video. Am I going to hurt my?
No, police activity. They do not copyright strike people. The thing is, if you put a video that is restricted from police activity, not all of them are, but some of them are, there's a possibility they might demonetize your video and make your video 18 and up.
Okay.
Because YouTube has a way of sensing that a restricted video is being played.
I don't know if it's restricted or not, but it comes off the police activity, 5.1 million subscribers. It comes off of their I'm gonna subscribe to. It comes
Well,
off of their
when you click it, it's gonna say, "You sure you want to watch this video?" And then you decide.
Oh, okay. All right. So that's not a problem. So here's the first one I sent them, and then the second one has a different. But this is the thing: is like most people don't see this side of policing, right? Now, I won't play the whole thing. I'm gonna play a little bit of it, right? And there's your warning right there. 15-year-old suspect gets shot by cops after shooting into crowd following high school football game. This is the Jacksonville event, okay? And the reason why I sent this to him is I wanted him to see this. This is after our discussion about the guy on the ground and everything we're talking about, because we only see these bad examples a lot in society, right? We don't see what the other side of things. And I thought that this one played out really well in terms of showing it. White shirt. Now he's firing back at him.
The suspect is returning fire.
Yeah.
It's a wrap then. Gotta take him down.
Right. Well, watch what they do.
Taking fire? Get the fuck out of here. Yeah, these dudes are heroes, man.
Running into gunfire.
He's running to the dailies. Running to the dailies.
He's an active shooter. You cannot disengage. You got to keep going.
Get on the fucking ground now! I'll fucking kill you!
Oh, this shit is shot. Good.
Got it? Yeah.
Look at the restraint they're showing.
Yeah.
Somebody handcuff him. Handcuff him. I ain't got handcuff. Neither do I. Mine's on the other guy. Put him on.
There you go.
You're hit? Who's hit? He. Where are you hit? My head. Your head? Yes. Hold on. Wait a minute, my head. And right here.
Take your hand to your head, kid.
On your hip?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So now they're gonna do life-saving measures on them.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
His gun's on him. Did you shoot yourself? No, you shot me. Somebody shot me. All right. Hey, give me your shears.
Look at that. They're trying now. They're trying to. The guy was just shooting at him, and they're trying to save his life.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do.
Right. They don't see. People don't see this part.
I know.
Right.
Like this is a guy that just broke the law
Here.
and just acted out some kind of video.
Yeah.
Right. I'm gonna stop it right here.
Right.
What I wanted to show though is that these guys went from one mode to another just like that. Thank you for the $20. Yeah, thank you for the $20. She's hubbed me out. She's like, it's to get demonetized.
Right. No, but it's a difference. It's not just that warning you showed. It's a different sign that says this is restricted, 18 years old. Click it if you want to move forward. So since you didn't see that, this one is not going to affect your channel.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Yeah, but I wanted to show that because there's a guy. This is a big time deal. This is a big deal. This is a 15-year-old kid who get caught up in whatever's in his mind, whatever's going through culturally, that turned him into this for a moment. Then all of a sudden the reality hit him with that bullet.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But then these cops. But these cops turned in from one thing to another, and just like that, in an instance, it turned. We're gonna save your life, kid. Don't worry about it. And they're just trying to kill him.
Also, the restraint of disengaging when the kid started surrendering. Technically, he could have kept firing, and he could have articulate that he still felt the kid was a danger. Instead, once he saw the kid getting on the ground surrendering, he disengaged. That's what cops do every single day. That's what they do and I think that type of scenario happens tens of thousands of times a year. When it doesn't happen, you hear about it. So if you really look at the numbers, you only hear about it a dozen times. But it has happened just like that 20,000 times.
Right.
Just like when you look at the actual statistics from the FBI, that's kind of like being curated by the Washington Post, which is a very liberal outlet. So if they could fudge the numbers, they would. You see that like 25 African Americans on average, between 20 and 25 African Americans who are unarmed get shot by cops every year. The rest had guns and was in gun battles just like that kid.
Right.
But if you watch the news, they'll say there's a epidemic, there's mass genocide of black people being shot who are unarmed being shot by police. And it's just bullshit. It's not true. It's not real.
Right. I know, and that's what that was going to be my point. Is the media is really responsible for this perception management that's going on with people in terms of the boys in blue. And it's just like,
Right.
and then they want to paint every cop as racist, right?
Right.
And they want to and all of a sudden, if you're a cop, your color doesn't matter anymore because you're blue now.
You're blue. I
Right?
learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
That the hard way. The moment I put on that uniform, it's like, oh, you a sellout. They were chanting, get another job during the George Floyd riots. Get another job, or you're a disgrace to your race. I was getting that from a lot of white folks. The purple-haired ones.
Yeah.
And all that stuff. But like you said, all of it is just the media, painting these false narratives and these false prophets. We now see in the news this guy Ibermex Kendi, however you say his name, they're saying he stole 30 million, allegedly. This is what they're reporting, that there's 30 million. He got like 30 million or something to that effect for writing his book about racism. And he was made a professor, I think, at Chicago, and he started his own think tank or whatever, and raised like $30 million. Only 2 research papers came out of that think tank, and they don't know where the money's at. And that's on top of the fact of the whole BLM situation where they had $90 million and we don't know where the money went. That just shows you all these people are crooks.
They are. And that whole thing is about, now I've been hearing this for a long time, that what they wanted, the global ownership class, the controlling, the cycle of control people, as I should call them, they were wanting to get rid of localized policing and have a federalized police force. And that one way to go about doing that is to do these things like to sensationalize the fact that local police, state police can't be trusted, so that needs federal oversight, right? So they can control everything from a federal kind of point of view. And one is to defund the local police by putting on stunts like this, creating groups like BLM, right? It obviously was corrupt from the beginning, and you saw the BLM. I'm sure you probably drilled down on the beginning of that. There was never any hands up, don't shoot, right?
Yeah, I mean,
and the guy was resisting arrest, and this idea that resisting arrest is okay. No, once the guy's got a gun.
Was it Michael Brown or was it? I thought it was the kid out of Florida. I thought it started with him.
It's Michael Brown. Yeah, it was the hands up, don't shoot.
Right. Yeah, we know that was bullshit. The DOJ report came back and said that didn't happen, and it was a black DOJ, and a black president. And this report came out saying, "Hey, the hands up, don't shoot was fake." But then we also had the same situation happen in the Jacob Blake case, where the narrative was Jacob Blake had stopped his car to help 2 women who were fighting break it up while he left his kids in the car. And then the police came out of nowhere and shot him in the back 4 times. We found out that that's not true. We found out that Jacob Blake was accused of sexually abusing his baby mama. And then she allowed him to come over just for a barbecue for the kid's birthday. He got into an argument. He was trying to kidnap the kids, and he had a knife on him. And he looked like he was going to stab the cop. That's what black witnesses said when they were questioned by the investigators. It looked like he was going to turn around and stab the cop. And that's when we saw the cop fire. We get these false narratives that basically just play into their agenda, which is that, hey, the police are racist. The police are going to hold you down. And maybe it is so that they can federalize. Because to be honest with you, a lot of people don't know that the federal agencies really don't have a lot of power. Like an FBI agent can't really do anything to you unless you're breaking federal law. They're not even police officers. They're peace officers. Like a federal agent can't even execute a search warrant in regular court. Whenever we ever work with the feds, they're not dealing with anything local. They're dealing with, for instance, I got a sex crime case that's working with the feds. They can't charge the dude I'm working on with rape because they don't have a rape statute in the feds. They have to charge them with the trafficking and, the other charges I don't want to say because it'd be too much information, but they don't even have rape statute. You know what I'm saying? Those things don't exist. So I can see how they want to try and phase out local policing to give that power to federal agents. And now the feds do a good job selecting people who are indoctrinated into their mindset. So now when shit hit the fan, people don't understand that when shit hit the fan, your local police is going to be on your side. If your whatever, your belief, your mission, your anger, is just. You know what I'm saying? If you're fighting for the Constitution, your police is going to be on your side at the end of the day. If the commies want to take over, your police is going to be on your side at the end of the day. But if it's federalized, they're going to do what their overlords tell them to do. At least that's my opinion on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, going back to how the media plays a role in this. Thanks, Vibe AI. How you doing, man? Thank you so much for that, man. Appreciate the 314. Oh man, that's what I appreciate it, man. Hey, I stopped by and said hi to you the other day, man. I hope you saw that in your chat.
Were you sending you pie or something?
Yeah. Yeah, he's a cool dude. The media and their attempt to sensationalize things for the agenda at hand, right? They created that whole the whole crisis actor staged event narrative in a sense because they were jumping to conclusions to sensationalize the school shooting in Sandy Hook and other places, these shootings that were going on during that time 10 years ago, getting all the press coverage, because every single time they would immediately pivot into gun control, right? And so I noticed this pattern. Now other people saw it and they started thinking, okay, these things aren't real, and they went off the deep end. And like I have on my board, that's one of the main things in the second veil we talk about because it was so impactful, right? It actually changed a lot that has to do with what we do today here on YouTube because of that narrative. It got out of hand, right? But people were buying into it because the media never circled back to correct their errors. They were too busy trying to read the establishment line in order to pivot to the establishment agenda, which at that time was gun control. And every time you see a shooting, that's what they pivot to. And they still do it today. But they that's why they leave out so many facts, because they're always trying to pivot to the narrative. And then when you take something like a big bombing event like a Boston or something like that, they just again do the same thing, but it's more like for lockdown, like more security, less freedom kind of thing. Like we were that was back in the day with the TSA and putting them on the streets and wanting to do more and more and violate your rights more and more. How much of your rights will you give up for security is basically what it was. They would take events like that, sensationalize the hell out of them really fast, get everybody worked up into an emotional frenzy, right? And then pivot to the narrative, because that's a way to get people to manufacture consent, right? To get people to cave into the narrative and give up their liberty for security.
Right. I agree. I agree.
So that's the same thing I think is going on with the police these days. And that's why I think media education and talking about these things and getting people to see the subversion that's going on in the media is part of the cure. And not the whole thing, but it's part of the cure is to educate people on the fact that the media is not being honest with us, and how can you read through the fallacies they're giving you? How can you stop yourself from going to the emotional part of it, like putting yourself in the situation or living in fear about it, or buying into somebody's like very tainted, biased take on it, right? Before you actually come to your own conclusion about it. We need to learn to step back. I've learned to step back and wait out the facts, wait out the evidence, wait out everything else. Let all that come to fruition before you make a decision about what happened. But we've been trained to jump into things and make quick decisions off this biased information that we're getting. And I think that's really affected the relationship between the civilians and the police force that are, there to protect us and enforce the law, right? You got, that's my take on that.
I agree 1000%. Right before I came on here, I spoke about, I got this big ass bug on the ceiling over there. I'm like, I got my eye on you, bro.
You got big eyes. You got those big eyes behind you on it too.
But so before I came on here, I spoke about this case. What was this case? Where's my phone? What's this guy's name? He had like a really weird name. All right, here we go. Here, Lakeon and Norris Woods. So on Instagram, there's this video of police officers wrestling an young African American male, 18 years old. They stressed that in the video. 18 years old African American is being handcuffed. His eyes are swollen, cheeks bloody, all that good stuff. And then in the next, Instagram, like you swipe it, you might get another video, you might get a picture or something like that. The next picture when you swipe is a still of an officer with his leg raised as though he's about to kick the kid while his hands is behind his back. The video doesn't show that. It just shows the average arrest, like tussling. The next picture is the foot, not touching the kid, but cocked back. Maybe he kicks him. I don't know. Everybody in the chat is like, oh my God, screw these cops. These cops are demons. Oh my God, da 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 da. This racism, it's the divide starts, right? It starts in the comment section. But then when you type in this, people say this is another king getting assaulted, because that's a big thing. People call in the Black community, people call each other kings and queens, like the notion that we come from that in Africa,
Mm-hmm.
A quick Google search shows that this young man was a fugitive from justice for murder. He robbed a 19-year-old African-American male, and then he killed him. If you just take the time to be patient and get all the facts, you would know that, listen, does anybody deserve police brutality? No. Maybe that happened here, maybe it didn't. But this guy does not deserve our collective anger. Let him work that out with his lawyers. What about the victim's family who's dead now?
Right.
You think they give a damn if this guy who was resisting arrest, who was escaping and trying to hide from justice, you think they give a damn if he got roughed up after he done killed somebody who will never, his swollen eye will go down eventually, but his victim will never come back. We see that happen time and time and time again, where people jump the gun. They assume they have all the facts from one picture, one video. And when the facts come out, it's totally opposite than what people thought they were dealing with initially. You got to stop it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the whole thing, is that you can't trust the establishment media anymore. It's just that they're not on the up and up. They're not doing real journalism. A whole nother topic, but at the root cause, information's behind it. This is the abuse, again, the cycle of abuse. This is informational abuse, right? Informational subversion. And it's always got some kind of, these days, has some kind of agenda behind it. And maybe it always has. Like we on this channel, we dived into the history of this on my Sunday show, which is called Old School Watch Party Sundays. I do it with Talking Trash and Truth. She's out there doing a great job modding for me tonight. Thank you so much. You rock. And we've been diving into the old school documentaries and digging into the past about how this new media system have come about and how they use it and where its roots are, the propaganda roots are located. And also on my show Unveiling Reality, which is on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I talk about these type of topics, right? So I'm unveiling the truth about these topics and through the research I've done and the correlations that I make. But this is informational abuse. Like, a lot of things can be pulled back to that. Someone's lying to you, it's a form of abuse, right?
Right.
That when you're done on a mass scale, it's a systematic form of abuse. And that's how I think that they turned people against people, cause division, and they get people to manufacture their consent towards whatever they want to do. They manufacture their consent towards their agenda.
Right.
And it sucks, but we're all born into it. So that's how I put this to people. If we're born into this world, well, all this stuff already exists. And
Right.
so we have to learn how to see through the veils that they put up to hide the truth from us. And that's what my channel is all about. That's the kind of shows that I put on. Like, so anyways, yeah, it's a great point. Now, let me ask you a question. We'll work on that, and hopefully, as more people generationally wake up and help and teach this to their children, they'll have the mental antivirus, right?
Fucker is flying, bro. Hold on, Kay. He wanna visit. Let me put you on pause real quick. You're gonna have to monologue this while I take care of this motherfucker.
I got you, man. Hey, you're not gonna pull out your revolver and start shooting, right?
That's why I need to get off the screen. No witness. I'll be right back.
Okay. All right. Hey guys, tomorrow night, tomorrow evening at 7:30 p.m. Old School Watch Party Sundays. With Talking Trash to Truth and myself, we're going to be diving into a very important issue, and I hope you will join us. It's about the food and water safety issue that's going on. Now, this has been going on for a long time. We're going to watch two documentaries and a report on this. We're going to watch The Fluoride Deception, which is about the water, Seeds of Death, which is about our food supply and how it's been tainted by things like GMOs and pesticides and so on, and how those things are affecting us. And we're also going to dive into what is going on with the meat and the push for insect food, as in we're eating insects. So we're going to cover all those topics tomorrow. I hope you join us. A lot of cool people come into that scene, and we have a great show, and we have just a chill kind of watch along party. It's at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, and that's myself and Talking Trash and Truth. And it's been going really well. We're into our third or fourth episode now, and everybody has a good time there. It's really chill. I hope you'll join us. And in case you didn't hear me earlier talk about it, I also do a show on Thursday night called Repairing History Together with Gary Lamb. We have great conversations about healing division and bridging the gap between blacks and whites and filling in the omitted parts of history. Now, we're going to have doing a lot of watch alongs with Thomas Sowell stuff, but we're also going to have people on like Strategic Guys and Matters of Opinion and other folks come in, drop in, and share their thoughts on different topics. So I hope you enjoy that. There's a lot of that content that's already out there on my channel. If you're new, I appreciate you being here tonight. Let me say hi to the crowd. Hey guys, make sure you want to ask. Let's do some Q&A with Strategic Guys now. He's coming back. Hopefully got that bug and everything's all right. Yeah, you're on mute.
All right, I'm back again.
There you go.
Cool. Yeah, I got it.
So you guys have some questions, man. Now's your chance to ask questions. Throw some questions out, man. I always encourage questions. I know we've been talking a lot, and people are coming and going as different things spin up. But I want to invite you to please ask some questions. Now's your chance to ask a police officer anything you want to ask about the law, about what he does, anything else that you can think of. Just go ahead and throw them out there. Just at me in the chat or at Strategic Guys in the chat, and we will answer your questions as they come in. So I heard you just off topic a little bit, but how do you feel about the term African American? Do you think that that's a good term, or do you think that I like to put American first. I've always thought when I heard that term first come out, I felt like it was kind of like, again, I mean, even at a young age, when it's been around for a long time, I felt like it was kind of divisive in a way. It's like it's putting another country before the country that we're in. And I always felt like it should be Americans of African descent. And I don't like that better. And I think that fits everybody. Like, Shirley could be an American of Italian descent, right? And that way we all get our heritage back, but we can be Americans first.
I just really don't think about that stuff, to be honest.
Mhm.
Like, it doesn't really matter to me. I don't feel like I have any connection to Africa, really. I'm a West Indian, I'm from the Caribbean. That's my culture.
Okay.
I just feel like, when you're in law enforcement, we actually use that. That's an easy way for us to identify people quickly. White male, black male. So we get indoctrinated into that's okay. You know what I mean? Because when you're running after somebody, you don't have time to say an Afro-Caribbean descent or an Eastern European guy.
Right. I get that.
He's like, yo, white guy, northbound, blue shirt, so you kind of I that's something that doesn't matter to me. I think I would love to get to a point where we are just Americans, but then again, I don't want to pretend like we don't have differences. There's probably some medical situations where most black people are lactose intolerant. That is something that uniquely comes with the color of your skin. Now, white people can be lactose intolerant too, but when you look at it, 80-something% of black people are lactose intolerant, and a single digit amount of white folks are lactose intolerant. It's all right for us to be different. It's also all right for us to categorize ourselves, because I think that's a part of the human condition. I think the problem is when we start marginalizing each other. Right. There is a question inside of the chat, though, from Mike Gohagan. And he asks if I ever, is he talking to you? He's talking to me. He's not following instructions, because you said at. At who you want to talk to. But I know he's probably talking to me. Do I ever feel guilty? The question would be, guilty of what? I've never arrested somebody who shouldn't be arrested. I never racially profiled somebody. I've never targeted white people. I've never targeted black people. I just go after criminals. And at this part of my career, I go after rapists, and sexual predators. So there's nothing that I have done in my career as a street cop or as a detective that I would feel guilty about, and I have never, the funny thing is I've never observed anybody engage in misconduct either. I've never seen a white colleague being extra rough with a black suspect or use police brutality or something to that effect. This stuff doesn't happen en masse. It happens, yes, but it doesn't happen en masse. So no, the answer is no. And he says, so no, then okay. But the answer is no. There's nothing for me to feel guilty about. And then for the not to go on and on, but for the better part of my career, I was pretty much an internal affairs investigator, really. So I went after corruption. That was sex crimes is a corruption in the prison system. So, I locked up officers. Like for a decade out of my career, my criminals were officers. So I don't know. He said, well, that's good. Thank you. That's a pretty good thing to do. Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. In terms of that, is there let's use some of the terms that I use. Is there a systemic problem with police officers racially profiling or being racist or being abusive? Like, what's your take on that?
I think that is one of the most complicated questions one can ask, because I think a lot of it is just human nature. If you're a white cop patrolling a predominantly black neighborhood where most of the crime, if not all of it, is being committed by black people simply because it's a low income black neighborhood, so who else is going to commit the crime? And it checks all the other boxes of what creates crime: poverty, lack of education, lack of opportunity, or the perception of the lack of those things, because perception could be just as good as reality. But you're going to look at that population without proper training and education. You're going to look at that population, and you might feel as though they're at a high propensity of committing crime. In that, and I was reading your private chat. Yeah, I'm good. Maybe like 20 more minutes, 20, 30 more minutes. And then we'll
already.
Cool. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, the reason why it's a complicated question is because I can't look into people's hearts. To cut it short, I can't look inside of somebody's heart. So I don't know if that cop who's Caucasian, who works in that predominantly black community where everybody he's arresting is black, I don't know if he's looking at those individual citizens and assuming that they're committing crime based off the color of their skin, or if he's doing it because they fit the archetype of the average criminal that he's arresting. And then we have to add in societal perceptions. So you're in a black community where most of the people committing crimes is black, which is expected. So they're doing what's going to happen in that type of community with that type of social, economic, educational system. And then you have the societal perspectives, like walking around with your pants hanging off of your butt. Society says that that's a thug outfit, a thug way of carrying yourself.
Well, yeah, isn't that a sign in prison that you're open for business?
Not really. That's like old school. Now all of that stuff is different now in prison, because people are now openly gay, and transgender people are in prison. People who want to have that type of relation, they just gravitate towards that population. You don't get a lot of rapes anymore. Toward the end of my career, we were getting almost no rapes to investigate. No allegations, no nothing, because they didn't have to do that. Because if you get caught having that type, if you rape somebody in prison, you become a sex offender just like on the streets. So they got street cred and all this stuff. Because you are now prey if you have that sex offender jacket on you that you rape somebody in prison. Now people who are bigger than you are going to want to hurt you. or they're not going to want to associate with you. So why do that when you could just go to the gay guy over there and give him a Snicker bar and he'll happily do whatever he wants to you, you know, whatever.
Huh.
But I don't know. I just, the bottom line is, reality is I can't say that because I don't know what's in that person's heart. I don't know how much of it is what they see or how much of it is what they actually feel, if it makes any sense.
No, it does. It does. And that's what I thought. It comes down to the individual, right?
Right.
And you know, there's some people out there that like to pretend to be police officers, that have fantasy about being police officers, for the power that position could give a person over another person, right? And some people get into it for the wrong reasons. It was that one guy down in Florida, man. He's a habitual offender of impersonating a police officer. He veils it as being a what do you call it? When you have a funeral procession and you have the people that go along and direct traffic and try to direct traffic,
right?
That ride along with them. There's this one guy, I forget his name, but he's a blonde dude. He dresses himself up like a cop. I see these guys all the time that pretend like they want to be cops. Why don't you just go become a cop, right? You know, why pretend to be one? These are
a lot of times, because listen, it's not that hard to become a cop, but it's also not super easy. So a lot of times when you look into guys like that, I think I know what you're talking about too. When you look into them, they can't pass the background check or they can't pass the psychological. A lot of guys get bumped for the psychological, you know, and so or you know, in those small towns where they're known, it might be don't hire him, you know. You know, he's not the right fit. He's a loose cannon. He's a wannabe. He's a buff. That's what they call them, a buff.
A buff.
You know?
Okay.
Yeah. But a lot of them it's the psychological. It's the psychological.
Yeah. That guy's funny. I mean, he's funny. You know, he does everything but put a badge on. He has a fake badge, and the lights are supposed to be the one color, and he changes them, and he pretends like he didn't do it. Oh, there you go, Jeremy Southern now. Mm-hmm. So tell me about the psych test. What's that like? I mean, that's a deep insight I don't think most people get to hear about.
I mean, it's like they're like
Jimmy Duet. That's it.
They're multiple choice questions. And after that, there's also, you know, it's your background as well. And so they take those questions and your background and you sit with a therapist and they kind of try and, you know, parse out if you're the, you know, first of all, you have to pass the test. It has its metrics that show whether you have a proclivity of, you know, and these are like the same tests that they give people to diagnose them with mental illness. Like when you're getting diagnosed with mental illness, it's not just sitting with a therapist. They also make you take tests, you know, true or false. What does this look like? What does that look like? This type of situation, how would you feel? You know what I'm saying? So it's a mixture of that. And then you have to sit with a psychologist, and that psychologist tabulates all of those different points. And then they ask you certain questions to elicit certain type of emotions out of you. And then they also ask you about your history. And a lot of people don't psych themselves off, because if you've seen a therapist before, that's a red flag for the departments. I've seen people get psyched off because their parents forced them to go to family therapy when they were a kid, and it wasn't even about them. It was about the parents. And they're like, oh, so a therapist, sorry, gotta go. They psych off a lot of guys from the military as well, believe it or not. Across this country, a lot of guys from military get psyched off. And it's, you know, it's very invasive, you know.
Okay, let me ask you some questions, just some general questions about the law. And this is about generally about firearms. I have some questions about firearms. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if I see a coyote in my backyard, can I shoot it?
Yes, you can on your property.
Okay, so I won't get in trouble if I fire a gun off my property.
We can't. No. We can't. Every state has different laws.
Okay.
Yeah, so you know, there's no one general law for, you know, any state. So you might fire it in Texas and you'd be like, okay, I'm good. You in New York, you could if that coyote is posing a danger to you, you can shoot that animal. But and New York is a super liberal state. But if you go to New Jersey, they're like, nah, you can't do that. So you know, there is no one good answer because every state has their own iteration of the law. Like I just found out Ohio, the max you could get for murdering somebody is 15 to life. That's the max. Now you can, if you are charged with other charges, the judge could choose to make you serve those things consecutively. So let's say you did the murder, but then you also stole a weapon, stole a car, and you also robbed a store, and they all charge you in one trial. Then they could give you the 15 to life. Then they could give you 2 years for stealing a car and 5 years for the robbery, and make that happen consecutively, which means you served each one of those sentences after the other. They could do that. But there's no higher charge than 15 to life. So if the only thing you did was the murder, you get 15 to life. I didn't know that. It's one of the few states that does that. Now, if your crime is super heinous, then the parole board won't let you out. And you could end up in there for 40 years. Because every time you go to parole, they'd say, you know, nah, we're not paroling them. But 15 to life, because in that state, they've decided to give the power of punishment to the parole board.
Interesting.
Yeah. That little girl who stabbed the mother and beat her mother with a frying pan, forgot her name. It was all over court TV. That's where I learned it from. Because she got sentenced to 15 to life. And they explained why the minimum, I mean, the most she could get is 15 to life, because that's what they do in Ohio.
Wow. Okay, so here's the next question. I don't have a concealed carry permit, right? But I have a pistol, right? If I keep it in the case in my car, is that considered concealed carry? And is there make a difference if it's a round chambered or not?
Once again, when it comes to guns, every state has a different law. Some states you don't even need a concealed carry permit. Some states you don't even need to register your gun. But it is generally accepted that for the weapon to properly be secured and not considered breaking any laws, you have to have it stored away in your trunk or in your glove compartment inside of a case, and there can be no rounds inside of the chamber, no magazines inside of the weapon. So once again, I don't know, your state might be like have a totally different rule, and they can do that, but it's generally accepted that to be complying with the storeway rules or laws or ordinances or whatever, everything has to be apart. No live rounds inside of the chamber, and it has to be in the trunk. You have to not be able to readily get it. They basically don't want you to get into a fender bender, get pissed off, and easily be able to flip the latch on a case, and because it's sitting on your passenger seat, nobody's there, and then put the gun together and then shoot somebody. You have to really think if you have to go in your trunk and load the weapon up. You have to think.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, hey, I'd like to welcome everybody from the Jessica Reloaded. We got a raid coming in. Thank you so much, Jessica, for the raid. I appreciate it. Welcome everybody that's coming on over. I appreciate you being here. So my next question is, what do you think about these laws that are being, I guess, especially in New York City, I think, where people are going into stores and just grabbing stuff and leaving, right? And they're not pressing charges against them. What's going on with that?
Well, I mean, I don't work in New York City, but that's not really happening in New York. Now, in places like Seattle, that's happening.
Or Los Angeles and other places like that.
And people got to understand about New York. New York is not one monolithic place. There's 5 boroughs in New York. Each borough has its own political makeup. Like Staten Island is more conservative than probably anywhere else in the country. Like they're rioting over there over the migrants. Like they have one of the most conservative district attorneys out there, and he will convict you if you steal a ham sandwich. But you go to a place like New York, like Manhattan, which is one of the 5 boroughs, where they pretty much don't even enforce prostitution there. They don't arrest people for that, you know? So what's happening is, but it's come to a point, because I know a lot of people who work in New York City, It's come to a point where they're making the arrest, and the district attorneys in all 5 boroughs are trying to prosecute them. But the state law is what's hampering them, the bail reform. So it's not that they're not being prosecuted. It's that the bail reform is mandating that they're released right after they are processed for arrest. So it's like no incentive, because like if you're a drug addict, you're like, okay, if I steal this and I get caught, I'm going to spend 3-4 hours in a police station. You know, I'm going to get high before I go stealing. I'm going to be fine in 3-4 hours, and then I'm going to get released and I can go steal again. But then if I don't get caught, then I have money, property to barter, sell, to get high. So it's a win-win for them. It's a win-win. There's no incentive for them not to steal. In the past, a drug addict has to deal with withdrawal. That's always on their mind, withdrawal. They go a day or 2 without the drug, they're going to go through withdrawal. So in the past, they had to say, do I really want to go and do X, Y, and Z crime that might get me incarcerated? Or even if I'm going to get out, I'm in jail for like a week before I see a judge and get released. Is it worth it to do that? And throughout that entire ordeal, I'm going through withdrawal. Or do I do something else? Right now, it's worth it for them to try and steal, and that's why they're stealing, because the punishment is just not enough to deter them.
Okay, so what do you think about with in cases of riots, right? So we see a lot of rioting going on these days. Like with the police stand down, like property getting destroyed, arrests not being made in these situations. Is there such thing as a stand down order? How do those work? And what's going on in these situations? Because we're just getting the television version, most of us.
Well, it's not. I'll tell you my experience being in the center of a riot. It's not that it's a stand down order. It's you feel like there's nothing you can do. So if you have 1,000 people riding around, it's just you. What are you going to do? There's nothing you could do. I think the other aspect, that's just me personally. Like I was in a situation where it was me and my partner, and it was literally 10,000 people riding, and it was just nothing. We both felt defeated. Like whatever power we thought we had, it didn't exist now because the people took over. It's like a moniker we had in the jail. The inmates and the officers understand that anytime the inmates could take the jail, there's nothing to stop that. They could just literally take over the jail, and we're all their prisoners. But they also understand that eventually we're going to take it back, and there's going to be hell to pay. Well, I was in the moment where I'm not going to call the population inmates. Absolutely not. I respect the people that I serve. But the Americans took back their country. There was no law and order. And I could grab one person, but that's just one person out of 10,000. There's still 9,999 people still out there. You know what I'm saying? And it wasn't just a situation where I was just standing around. Like I'm also dodging bricks, bottles, trying to fight for my life, So I think a lot of these officers being put in that position where they're understaffed, undermanned, trying to quell these mass disturbances, and it's just not much that they can do. If they want this store, they're gonna take that store. Like you look at Philadelphia, the people robbing the store, those cops were trying. They got 1 or 2 people, but while they're wrestling with those 2 people on the ground, there's 500 leaving. What the problem is that we need to stiffen the penalties for these things. We need to say this is not acceptable, because they really serve no purpose. You're not fighting for freedom, stealing from the Apple store. I'm going to talk about that tomorrow on my show with the whole meatball bullshit. I don't know if you heard about that girl Meatball.
No,
Meatball is some Instagram influencer, TikTok influencer from Philly, some overweight African American girl who was out there rioting and telling all 20, she has like over 100,000 subscribers. She's telling like 20,000 people watching her on the live at that moment to come out and riot, basically. So they're basically saying, crediting her with being one of the organizers of the looting. And
oh yeah, okay, yeah. The pregnant
Right.
one, right? Okay.
she's not pregnant. No, she looked like she's pregnant, but she's not pregnant.
Oh, okay.
But like, they're going in there and they're stealing from the Apple store. And everybody knows you take anything from the Apple store, Apple has perfected the shutdown software. The moment you steal
Yeah.
it from the store, you can never use it. You can take it to the most tech genius motherfucker out there. He can't reboot that shit and let you use it. It's worthless. It's just plastic and glass at that point. So what do? They know they can't use it. They start stomping on it, breaking it, pouring juice on it. How does that serve towards racial equality? How does that serve toward justice? Why are we accepting this in our society? It's one thing when you're marching en masse and it's peaceful and you got 1 million people in the streets, cars can't move, people can't even leave buildings because there's so many people out there saying we want change, singing and chanting. That's America. That's democracy. But the moment you start breaking things and stealing, you robbing a liquor store, you going into the Popeye screaming, everybody must eat. Throw the chicken over here on my mama. This is like quotes of what they were saying. On my mama. Throw me some chicken on my mama. How is that helping the conversation? How is that making you a freedom fighter? We need stiffer penalties. It should be a felony to riot, punishable by 5 to 10 years in prison.
I agree.
Restitution, each person should have to pay restitution for the value of the entire store. So even though you stole one TV, you have to pay in restitution all the TVs that were stolen. Yep.
I agree. And so is in that spirit and in the line of work that you're doing, I strongly feel that when false accusations are made that could put someone in prison for life and ruin their life, that the person who's made the false allegations should face the same penalties as the person would have had they committed the crime.
And what are we talking about? Sex crimes?
Yeah.
I disagree.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
I disagree because I used to think that way.
Okay.
But I bought into and I totally understand that what will happen is you will deter victims from coming forward.
Why is that?
I just fixed my camera, so if you see me flip around.
Oh, no worries.
All right. Because you're going to have people who are going to think, well, if they can't prove my allegations, they're going to send me to jail. So I just rather, I've got a gray area. I mean, there's a lot of cases we get that's gray areas, but the person really is a victim. They really are a victim. It's just life is muddy sometimes. Maybe it started out that they wanted to be with the person and they were having a good time the first 5 minutes into the sex. And then maybe, the person started slapping around and choking them and it's not what they want and they want it to stop and their attraction is over. And now they feel like they're being taken advantage of. And like when you look at the evidence, it's muddled because part of it was consensual and part of it was not. That does not mean they're not a victim. They're absolutely a victim. They deserve justice. But that type of person is going to say, you know what? If they don't believe me, they're going to send me to jail. Or the person who has a history of lying, who has made 1 or 2 allegations before that was bull crap. But now life has a funny way of working that they actually were grabbed into an alleyway this time for real by a stranger, raped and taken advantage of. That person's going to be like, well, I got a history of being found to be a liar. If I come forward and they didn't pass the law yet, but now they passed that law 2 weeks ago. If I come forward with this genuine allegation of me being raped, if they don't believe me, I'm going to go to jail. That's why we don't have those laws right now, because we don't want to dissuade people from coming forward, and I like to believe and hope that, investigators, detectives will do a good job and we could parse through the bullshit and not send somebody who's innocent to prison. But, I think those are both tragedies. It's a tragedy if somebody goes to jail and they're innocent, just as much as it would be a tragedy if somebody is a victim but is afraid to come forward because they feel like they won't be believed. And they'll be punished by being sent to prison, you know?
I hear you, and listening to your point of view, that's like, I think it's really, you've made some good points. I'd like to believe there's middle ground here. So perhaps that another system could be made that would then address that as okay, we're going to investigate with some people that are skilled like yourself. We're going to investigate this now because you see, you made this accusation. It was proven not guilty. Doesn't mean that you're going to be charged with anything.
Let me say this. Those laws do exist. Like if we could prove that you lied outright, or like really, I was talking about like those gray areas. But if you lie outright, yeah, you could be charged. You know, you're making a false police report. You know, that exists. Right. Well, and it does happen.
There's a police report, but there's also the gravity of the consequences, right?
Well, no. Well, listen, you like, for instance, and I don't mean to cut you off, but there was a case that I know about. You know, I actually saw the lady in the prison system where she went out clubbing with her friends. They got into an argument. She decided to just go with the first guy that was like, yo, you're beautiful, want to hang out? Because she just wanted to get away from her friends. And so she went to the guy's house. His family was there. She sat, ate with the family, chilled, talked. And then he's like, yo, you know, you want to go do something? And she's like, I don't care. You know, and then she goes and has sex with him. And it was totally consensual. She had no problem with it. She probably would have called him the next day. But her friends, like, now they call her up and they're like, where are you? We're worried about you. You know, and they're like, you know, forget about the argument we had. Like, where are you? And she's like, she let it slip. I'm with this guy. So now her friends who had long before would start being worried about her. So they're looking for her for hours. So they were already mad about her for a different reason. Now they're looking for her for hours, and now they're mad about her that they think she might be dead or hurt or raped or whatever. When they finally get in contact, they got a sigh of relief. But once she said, I'm with this guy, then they start calling her a whore and all that extra stuff, that she's with a guy that she just met. These are some friends, man.
Right.
So she said, no, he raped me. Because she was afraid of the embarrassment of her friends looking down on her for going and hanging out and sleeping with this random guy. He went to jail for he had like a long sentence, like 15 years, but he had served like 3 years of it until she finally came forward and said, I lied, which is sad because he would have did his whole time if she didn't come forward. It's sad that they didn't have enough evidence to prove that he was innocent. Anyway, they released him from prison immediately, expunged his record, and they gave her 6 years in prison.
Perfect.
So pretty much double what he did.
Yeah, I mean, that was brave of her to come forward. I'm glad the guilt got to her because
she wasn't brave.
Wrong.
She didn't know that she was going to get in trouble because I got all that detail. They did a whole expose on her, like a 48 hours, whatever, something like that, 60 minutes type situation. When they spoke to her, she was like, and towards the end, she's like, yo, if I'd have known I'd have got locked up, I'd have never said anything.
That's the thing, man.
That's a double-edged sword right there.
It really is.
So now, if we are starting to lock these ladies up, you think any lady would come forward and say, yo, I lied? I said, if we start locking these ladies up, do you think any lady would come forward and think say that they lied?
No, I agree with you. It's a conundrum. I'm thinking about what you said. Sure. That makes sense. So it's kind of wild because you're kind of caught in a situation here. Well, if you have that, you're going to have this situation where someone got away with a false accusation, and then the guilt isn't able to work on them, right? Because they're going to have the fear working even bigger on them.
Right.
But at the same time, there needs to be justice for people who make false accusations up front that is equal to what the other person would have faced. So in some way, there has to be some kind of that's something we need to think about and work on. We're not going to solve that problem tonight. But that you gave me something to think about right there, and I appreciate that. I love that when that happens. It doesn't happen all the time.
Even on the civil side, like like a lot of times they'll get sued afterwards, and same thing. Like the girl who said that the football player raped her, she sued the school, got a resettlement. They actually like hired him. He's still working for the NFL. He had an opportunity to go do a team. I think he made the team for like a year, but he's just out of shape because he was in jail all that time. But the NFL actually hired him, so he still works for the NFL. He sued her, and she said the same thing. Like, yo, I wouldn't have said nothing because he had a private investigator talk to her, and she admitted it. And she said, yeah, I want to help him, and I want to say that I lied or whatever. But he sued her, and she said, yeah, I wouldn't have come forward if I'd have known he was going to sue me. It happens all the time. So, like you said, we could talk about it for hours, but I agree with you. We have to find some type of middle ground because I don't want a victim to be afraid to come forward who really is a victim, that she's afraid she might go to jail. I also don't want a situation where somebody who is guilty, who has a guilty conscience of lying, is afraid to come and tell the truth and possibly free somebody who's doing jail time because they're basically putting their self-preservation first. But then again, I agree with you 1000%. I wish there was a perfect world where we could make them pay so that other people know, don't do this, otherwise you're going to go to jail. But how do we get to that balance? I don't know.
I know. Yeah. It's a conundrum. And, it's all about, unfortunately for the law, you have to like solve for the lowest common denominator in almost every case. Yeah. So this has been, thank you for those answers, man. I appreciate it. And I guess the other things I wanted to ask you about was the prison industrial complex and what your thoughts are on that. I feel like a lot of society sets people up for the prison industrial complex, and there's this argument about private prisons versus public prisons, I guess, and that when it's a for-profit prison, that there's a lot of incentives laid out to fill those prisons up so they can make money off of them.
Right. Well, I never had any experience with private prisons. It's not really something that's big in New York. I think they do have some private prisons, but they're mostly contracted with the federal government to like house migrants and stuff like that. As far as the state system, the system that I worked for in New York State at the time was trying its best to kind of get these guys reintegrated in society. I think a lot of times the issues that we had were the citizens on the outside and what they were willing to invest to rehabilitate these guys. So we had college programs, and lots of guys were getting college degrees, and their recidivism level was almost zero. They was leaving, they were getting jobs, they weren't interested in crime anymore. And then people started complaining, saying, hey, listen, I can't afford to send my kid to get a college education, but you're letting these convicts who have committed crimes against people get it. What should I do? Should I send my kid to go rob a bank so they could go get a degree? So then they stopped doing that. Then they did it on a smaller scale where now private dollars and fundraisers were paying for them, but it was on a much smaller scale than it was when it was public dollars paying for them to get these educations, paying for them to get welding degrees and plumbing and certificates and electrical certificates so that they can come out and do the job. So that's just inside. Now on the outside, is there a school to prison pipeline? I do agree. There is, especially in a place like New York City where I grew up. I didn't have a lab. We didn't have any teams, any sports, any drama class, glee club, nothing. When I went to my library, I've always been fascinated with history and different cultures. In college, I took a couple courses in Asian history and Asian studies, took courses in Judaism, metaphysics, took courses in ancient Rome, took courses on architecture, Gothic cathedral architecture. Like whenever I had electives that I could fit in, I would take these type of courses and learn about different cultures and stuff like that. And so I go into my library when I was in grade school, and I pick a book about the Romans, and this book was like civil rights. And it's saying, this is why we're the dominant race and why white people are the chosen ones by God. Like this, they're talking about don't get me wrong, the history and the stories that was in there about Roman and the gods and all that stuff was spot on. It's the same thing you'll find in any book. But when the author was like interjecting like his own opinions, but like a preface before a story. It was racist stuff. It was white supremacist stuff. That's the kind of and I'm only saying that's the type of investment you have in these schools in the city. You know, that you barely have a library, and when you have a library, they're like sourcing donated books. So it's not curated, you know. And I say all this to say I look at the school my kids go to now, where they all have a iPad and a Chromebook. You know, their laboratories are like you're in a literal pharmaceutical laboratory. They have 2 gyms. They have Olympic-sized swimming pool. We have golf, lacrosse, basketball, football, baseball. They teach you home ec. They teach you how to bake and sew and balance a checkbook. In high school, they teach you how to play the stock market. There's a big difference between the type of education a kid gets in the middle class or the upper middle class versus what they get where I grew up in the dungeon, in poverty, Harlem during the crack epidemic. So when you're putting these kids, and this is not private, somebody says this a private school. No, this is a public school. It's a public school, but we're paying $20,000 in property taxes. 80% of that is going to the schools. That's the difference. They're fully funded. They have more money than they know what to do with, so we get the best teachers, we get the best principals, the best curriculum. Now, my son just started school. They have a new program now that they started for my son's school year, where from now until he graduates from high school, he's doing a dual language program. English and Spanish.
That's impressive, man. I've never heard of a public school doing all this stuff, man.
They're doing this all across the country. But it's not, but it only affects people who are middle class, who can afford to live in houses. That's just it. There's a two-tiered educational system. And so when you got a kid growing up in Harlem like I did, with no resources, no outlet, school's done at 2:45, you're out. School done at 2:45 over here, and nobody's leaving the school because everybody has an extracurricular activity that they have to do after school. But in the city, it's like, yo, you're gone. Like, get out of here. Now you're on the streets. Your parents ain't home. They don't get home till 6, 7 o'clock. Between 2:45, 6, 7 o'clock, the streets own you. The streets is raising you. When you have a situation like that where young children have no outlet to release that energy, to get direction, you're going to get them committing crime. You're going to get them making mistakes. I can use my son as an example again. He's 4 going on 5. Sometimes he's so energetic. He's like, running around. I find if I want to be lazy and I'm like, son, go play, he'll go find mischief to get in. But if I just take the time to play with him, take him outside, make him run in circles, run with him, play catch, play football with him, wrestle with him, he's expending that energy constructively. And then when we're done, he's tired. He doesn't want to run around. He doesn't want to go find mischief. That energy was constructively channeled. It's the same thing, the same concept for these kids. So yes, we do have a school to prison pipeline because we're not giving our children an outlet. And it's, I blame the parents for a lot of things. I'm one of those guys, but at the same time, we got to give these parents a break because we've built a society, especially in a place like New York where I grew up, where poor people are paying $2,000 rent. The poor of New York, the bare bottom poor of New York is the rich of Oklahoma. And so these folks have to go work 10, 12, 13-hour days in order to survive in a place like New York. So of course they're not going to be able to be on top of their children when both mommy and daddy have to go to work because mommy's bringing home $60,000, daddy's bringing home $70,000. And when you put that income together in New York, that's the working poor. $130,000 is a working poor in New York.
Wow.
So it's, it is what it is. Go ahead. I'm sorry, man.
Yeah, no, that was great. That was great. I like that, man. And I agree with you. We have to take back our responsibility and as parents, and we also have to defend our parental rights too. I think that you have an exceptional school system wherever you're at. It's exceptional, man. I've never heard of a school doing all these great things. Honestly, there's a lot of worry about what's going on in public schools, especially with it when it comes to the curriculum and when it comes to what after school activities they're offering. So
well,
I feel
I gotta
blessed
say,
for
I
that
live in a conservative county. I live in a very conservative county, and you know, I guess we're focusing on actually educating kids rather than indoctrinating them into whatever. I'm not saying into what, I'm saying into whatever.
I hear you. And hang on to that. And I'm sure that you're very involved. You sound like a very involved person, and you sound like I mean, obviously a great father, and you're there raising your kids, and that's what we all need to do as parents. You know, when we need to stick together, we need to raise up that role model leadership that you're showing right here. You know.
Yeah.
Like when that was, man, thank you so much. Yeah, man, absolutely. Wow, I think that's a great place to end on, because that was a magnificent statement you made, and I really appreciate you coming on the show and getting to know me and getting to know the crowd here, man. What we should do is definitely do this again. I want to have you on for repairing history together with myself and Gary Lamb. And speaking of Gary Lamb, we're going to be sending you over to Gary Lamb after this. He's running the live over there. Nice. One he's been talking about all week long. He's been really excited about this live. So I want you guys to go over there and see Gary Lamb. So Strategic Guys, tell us what you have coming up.
My usual, man. I'm not even going to sit here and try and sell it like I got something amazing coming up. No, just a regular Strategic Guys show. Every Sunday, 10 p.m., we do a live stream. Maybe 1 or 2 shows. I'll do some pre-produced shows and shipping out if something's really happening in the news. But we are a Sunday, 10 p.m. Eastern live show. For the members, I have a membership program. My members get on average 3 to 5 videos where we do deep dives into the law enforcement stuff, some of the crazy cases I have, told in a respectful way, of course, that protects people's identities, etc. But you know, listen, I'm a small growing YouTube channel. Please consider coming over to the channel and subscribing and becoming a part of the family. To all my peoples who are here from the Strategic Guys Show, please do subscribe if you haven't already done it to Winning Reality. Amazing show. Really had a good time here. But yeah, just support the channel and help both of us grow.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that. And right back at you guys. Hopefully you've had a chance to subscribe to Strategic Guys. He does great stuff over there, and he's a great man. Hey guys, and if you're new here, guess what? At the end of the show on Winning Saturday Nights, we do a jam, and we got to jam on out of here, man. And we got a great song tonight, and definitely, it's about a 6-minute jam. The guitar solo at 5 minutes is worth staying for the jam, man. So I'm excited for you guys to hear this. I will be back tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. Eastern with Talking Trash and Truths for Old School Watch Party Sunday, and we're going to be covering the food and water safety issue with two great documentaries and a report at the end. So please join us. It's a lot of fun. I hope to see you there. And Strategic Guys, thank you so much for being here, sir. I appreciate everything that you do. Thank you for your service to this country and to the people in it. And I got you back, man. So thanks again. And guys, until next time, keep on winning.